Oh, it's working properly now. Yeah.
To be probably part of the 10K.
Legit scientists right now are positing that we live in a simulation.
I feel like a lot of stuff is going on in the world that's brought up a lot of these conversations, even in our last couple episodes, just with UAP disclosure and, the Nephilim.
Hi, Diane. Hi, Phil.
Always come back to.
The world largely rejects their message and treats them as hostile extraterrestrials who must be stopped at any cost. Gary, how have you been?
All things considered, pretty good, considering I'm still recovering from COVID, and I've got, I guess, a version of what they call long COVID now, so I'm kind of up and down every day, but still doing, I think we're getting a little bit better, so, and I'm still staying busy. I just don't do the 12 or 14-hour shifts, right? So I go for as long as I can, and when my head sort of gets a little bit groggy or I get tired, then that's enough. That's it. That's enough research for the day.
I misspelt the hi guys. It says hi Gus. Is anyone here named Gus?
Your new book, I heard that it has a release date.
It does, and I have an update for people who are following that closely, particularly for people who have pre-ordered the book. So the original release date was put out for March 12th in late October, early November, and kind of a long sort of ways out based on what I've seen happen before, particularly with my first book, and it didn't take anywhere nearly that long. But what has gone on is there's been a paper shortage, and there is a printer shortage, and there is a labor shortage. And so it was in the queue since, I would say late September, early October, probably more like late September, went into the queue for printing. And if you want to get it up on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, and particularly with Amazon, is you have to have a release date that you can guarantee. Otherwise, the large retailers are going to punish you significantly. So they went for March 12th to be safe, because they don't just punish the author, they punish the whole publishing company and all the authors that come along with that. So I was talking to my publisher about a week and a half ago, and it's out of the queue and it's at the printers. So that means it's going to beat the publishing date by quite a bit. I still don't have a firm date, but I'm hoping late December, early January will beat it. And as soon as the books are printed, I'll get my inventory. So people who are pre-ordering with me will get the first books, unless they decide Amazon is going to get theirs first and they want to start selling it and shipping it before the release date. So there's still no ability to pre-book on the Kindle version. But I understand that that's not unusual, even though if they've had the digital version for Kindle for 2 months now. They won't put that up until closer to the release date, and maybe not even until the print date. So seems to me there's still more of a push to push the print than the digital. But there will be a Kindle version, which is to be reassured. And I'll get that link for the Kindle version up on my website as soon as I can get a link that's active and they haven't listed. So that's what's going on. And I have up on my website, for people who are interested in it, you go to the Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 2, Genesis 6 with the number 6conspiracy.com. And on that website, there's a generous excerpt for book 1 of all 98 chapters, and also for book 2 of all 84 chapters. And even though it's a generous excerpt, it's still a small drop in the bucket as to how much information is in there. It's just designed to sort of maybe get your interest, and it's not all the juicy parts. It is loaded with information. And you can't put all of that into a small, 300-word excerpt, but 300 words is not a small excerpt. But I like to have people understand what the chapter is about, what the book is about, and then if they want to order, you can order from my website. There's a page on both books. There's a page for Canada, there's a page for the US, and there's a page for anywhere else in the world, or overseas, as I like to call it. So you just go to that page to order a signed copy from me. And if you wanted to order a Kindle edition, or
Hey, Susan, good to see
somewhere
you.
else to buy the book, I've got the Kindle link up there. I will have for the new book as well when it's ready. And I have a link over to barnesandnoble.com, over to amazon.com, and amazon.ca. So if you're wanting to find out information about the book and you want to buy a book, that's the easiest, fastest way to get a hold of the book. Now, there's a sales force out there, so I'm looking for it to be on shelves in stores. I just don't know who's going to pick it up. But the last book, was on shelves. It may not be on many shelves after 8 or 9 years out there, right now. But I would imagine if they're bringing in book 1, they're probably going to bring in some book 2 if you wanted to support your local bookstore. And you can order it through Bookmasters, or the store can, which is the distributor for Deep River Publishing. So if you want to special order it and get it and support your local bookstore, you can do that too.
Yeah. Dude, that is very, very cool. I'm very excited about it. I reference you. I use your book as like an encyclopedia when I make videos and I need to reference, secret societies or something in there, and I want to be able to pick your brain without talking with you. Of course, we always give.
Phil, people like your streams because they can see the passion in you.
Give the nod to your book, but it is a really good piece of work. I'm not just blowing smoke. A lot of us really, really like it. It's something where we can read multiple times and reference throughout, the Fringe journey. Every time I think of Gary Wayne, I think of not the one world order, but I think of the Nephilim world order. And I mentioned to you that even Tucker Carlson, in passing, said the word Nephilim in an interview with Roseanne Barr. And can you explain to us, and take your time, of how the Nephilim world order is actually coming to be right here and right now? Like, it's not, it's not some sort of, it's happening, but it's not 100 years into the future. It's going down right now. Am I right on that?
Yeah, and you can actually say we're probably in it right now too, but not full blown. So one of the things I learned about the occult and the bloodlines and secret societies is they have allegories upon allegories, and everything is chosen, whether it's an acronym or a word that they want to use in a metaphorical way, or symbolism, to just not give one meaning but many meanings. So when they talk about the New World Order, that's a term that's been around for over 100 years. And it's the order that they were trying to get even in the time of President Wilson. They were talking about a new world order because of World War I, and certainly again after World War II. And it's really the superficial term for one world government. So when the Bushes talked about 1,000 points of light in their New Order speeches, both Junior and Senior, and actually Junior even used it at Senior's funeral, that's the spark of the divine, or the people who have the gene of Isis, the LB gens, the Julia gens, the Elvin gens, whichever gens that they have, that they're trying to collect for that New World Order, so that they can sort of help bring about an evolvement or a vibration, as the New Age would sort of talk about it, into a new level of godhood, or going back to the old demigod status, because again, offer godhood in the spiritual realm. So where I was going with that idea of that world government is who is running it. And so if you look at things that can have several meanings, that was kind of odd to me that they decided to keep New World Order because it's not so new anymore.
Yeah.
And it has different sort of incarnations, but it's also, if you look at it from the Nephilim world order, I mean, the Nephilim and the Rephaim, and I talk a lot about the Rephaim as being sort of the inheritors to that ancient Nephilim world order that was before the flood, that the globalist forces are trying to rebuild. And we might know that through the allegorical lens of Francis Bacon.
Yeah, true.
Who wrote The New Atlantis, about this one world government that had a religion that was in perfect harmony with science. And so that was their idea of what happened in the first time in the golden age, in the time of Atlantis, that was trying to impose a Nephilim world order. And people aren't familiar with the Atlantean story. Poseidon marries Cleito. Poseidon is an Olympiad god, and Cleito is a human female, and creates 10 giant kings, 10 Nephilim kings, 10 hero kings, as they're understood in the Greek mythology. And these are giants, and they have 10 parts to their empire. And so they want to recreate that new Atlantis, as Bacon talks about, or the
Hey,
new
Wayne,
age,
good to
as the
see
New
ya.
Age talks about. And that's why you have like the Club of Rome or the United Nations, who have divided the world up into 10 groups of nations. That's the model that they're foreshadowing that they want to bring about in this new world order. And it's led by the bloodlines of the Nephilim from the occult perspective. Although I would argue from a second incursion, which I lean to more than a survival of giants, that it's the Rephaim bloodlines that they're taking these genealogies back to. So all of the royales, and I talk about Rex Deus, or Rex Deus in the first book, which means kings of God. I'll expand on that in the new book about royale. And royale is Old French for king, and al is a transliteration of el, as in a god or an angel. And it could be il or ilu in Mesopotamian transliterations, or al in some of the Arabic transliterations, and also in the word Baal, which is a key word for the royales and for the secret societies and the Gnostics. That means the Lord God. And they'll be using that Lord God overlay as part of how they're going to usurp the Bible for their own interpretive purposes in the end time. So they are the kings of God, and the royales are dynastic by definition. The royales keep genealogies, and they only intermarry for the most part amongst royales to keep their bloodlines pure. And they track those genealogies all the way back to what they would say the original patriarchal Nephilim or Rephaim, and to a celestial god father, part of the celestial mafia, the fallen angels, also called the Nephilim. And I introduced that term in an explained way in the new book as well, because people confuse Nephilim with Nephilim. And Nephilim is the root word for Nephil and Nephilim, and it means to fall. So when you have a verse in Isaiah 14 where it's talking about Hail El, son of the morning, it is Hail El ben Shakar, and in the King James Version it says Lucifer, the god of the Freemasons and the god of the Gnostics, as an Italian word inserted for a Hebrew word into the English language. Nothing odd there, except that we may want to, at least replace it with Satan if we don't want to say Hail El. I get maybe not using a fallen angel's name, but when you have Gabriel or Michael, it's translated directly as a name versus its meaning. So one would think they would have been consistent, or at least gone to Satan versus Lucifer. But I'm down another rabbit trail. So when you see that word, he fell from heaven in Isaiah 14, that's the Hebrew word Nephal. And he's the chief god of the fallen angels, the Nephilim, I am being the male plural, or the fallen ones, which is where that term comes from. And they are the godfathers of the Nephilim, which is an extended word. So it has an association with Nephilim as its source and root, but it's not exactly the same meaning. So the Nephilim are demigods as spiritual offspring versus being the spiritual gods who take a physical form in the physical world to create these physical demigods. And so the Nephilim of the Shemayim, the heavenly ones, Shema being heaven in the singular, are these godfathers that everybody as a king will take their genealogy back to. So they receive that divine right to rule and always have. And that's why they've been able to control much of the world. But now they want to have it not as competing empires, but as one geopolitical force under 10 kings for that seventh empire, the fifth empire of Daniel, for the end time that they're trying to bring about. And that the Nephilim are the invisible ones who have spirits offspring who are the visible ones, as the Bible speaks about, that we fight against both, and they provide the authority and that divine right to rule, as you guessed it, the mighty gibbering King James used as one of his major propaganda pieces, that he ruled with the divine right to rule, and as all the kings believed that they had that authority. So you roll that forward today and you have this right of inheritance ritual of kingship that's been passed down since the time of the Nephilim, before the flood, and the Rephaim at the Assembly of Gods at Mount Hermon, as the Ugaritic text places it, with the not only the Assembly of the Gods at the top, but also the Assembly of the Datanu or Datanu, which are the giant tribes, who are the visible ones, and the kings that are ruling, that are at that council. They receive their divine right to rule from them. And so King Charles III swore his oath to a god, not the God of the Bible, but to a specific patriarchal God father, as in one of the celestial mafia. And so they do things in plain sight, but you have to understand that this would not be done as a monotheist ritual. Right. It's just done with the gloss of monotheism, so that they can honor and receive the authority to rule from the specific God. So it would trace his bloodlines back to one of the Baalim of the Council of Gods. If people are familiar with the Council of Gods, I go through that in the new book as well, because once you introduce the Nephilim of the Shemayim, you got to sort of get into that. And so biblically, we get that in Psalms 82. And if people who have read Kaiser's or Dr. Heiser's work, they'll be familiar with that. And I haven't read his work, but from what I understand, what he wrote and talked about, I'll go quite a bit further in that understanding, both in Hebrew and how it connects into other parts of prophecy and history. So this is the council of the gods that Satan sits above. Right? He's the prince of the world, the god of this world, and you have this council of the gods. And you have, in Deuteronomy 32, you have the 70 nations that they're going to govern. And the 70 nations are numbered by the patriarchs in Genesis 10 and 1 Chronicles, and by the number of Adam's sons before the flood. So there's 70 nations before the flood, 70 nations after the flood. Even though we don't get the 70 sons of Adam listed, Deuteronomy says there was, so I accept that there was. And that each god of that council would have been the head of a particular nation. And as those 70 nations spread across the world from Babel, they would have a specific god assigned to that country and a complete throne room, just as you would have at the Assembly of the Gods, being duplicated, and just as the visible king and queen would be that visible throne room on earth as well. Now, if they expanded that nation's territory, let's say like in modern understanding, if England started the United States or Canada or Australia, you would have that god overseeing all of those, but then you would have a god and a whole throne room underneath that hierarchy assigned to each of those countries as well, but sourcing back to the original nation. And I'm not saying England was an original nation, I'm just talking about in sort of in modern parlance, but we can get an idea from where the people, the 70 patriarchs went from the time of Babel as to what those main nations are and what those expanded branches would be, and they would report right back up that hierarchy. So I'll cover off and redefine the angelic hierarchy in the new book as well. It's not that much different than the standard hierarchy, but I'll give you all the names of the Bible in the Bible and their positions and where they fit in the hierarchy. So you've got 3 different levels, but you've got 4 different columns, and 2 belong to one of the columns. And just to sort of summarize it, and you have to understand, or you don't have to understand, it's good to sort of understand that the fallen angels counterfeit everything that's in heaven. And so their hierarchy looks the same.
Okay.
So it's just a counterfeit. So one would presume that with the 70 nations, there'd be a loyal angel that was assigned as well, but in different sort of ways, and they're not really involved to this point in time. So when we talk about, sorry, I got off track. So when we talk about the New World Order, the Nephilim world order, it's reporting back through these royal bloodlines even to this day, but they want to cement those 10
Hey, Dots, good to see you, mate.
as being Antichrist sort of wannabes until the end time Antichrist comes at the midpoint of the last 7 years. And so if we want to know what's going on in the world today, that's the jockeying of positioning that's going on.
Let me ask you this, Gary. Is there any way for us to know what God King Charles was referring to? Like, do we have a way to trace that all the way back to the specific Godfather?
Yeah, we have a few ways of doing it. We may not be able to get him back to a specific one, but when we look at the coat of arms, and it used to be on a standard sort of flag that they would carry wherever that they went, and with the heraldry that's in it, it is a taciturn communication between other royals, who they are, who they come from, who they've ennobled their bloodlines with, and who their godfathers would be. So typically on a lot of the coats of arms, you have very odd, at times, animals.
Yeah.
So you have like eagles. You have bulls at times. You have unicorns. You have lions. And these all represent fallen angelic beings. And they would have loyal ones still in heaven as well, but not the ones that they're representing are the ones who rebelled. So, if you look at a lion, you've got gods in prehistory like Nergal, who's in the Bible, and he's depicted as a lion-faced god and a god of war. You might look at Mahis or Sekhmet or Bast as lion-type gods in Egyptian mythology and history. And they all
The sneezes will come. I'll sneeze soon, you watch.
Just like them. So if a seraphim angel produces a serpent face, with a serpent face would produce giants that look like them, which is why we have so much serpentine imagery in the kingships. Then if a lion angel reproduces, then it's going to look like them. So dragons are another typical, unusual figure on coats of arms. That's going back to a seraphim angel. But who does a lion go back to? Well, there's a group of one of the group of 4 watchers, archangels, Ophanim, seraphim, and cherubim are the 4 groups. And the cherubim have 4 faces. They have one of a bull or an ox. They have one of a lion. They have one of an eagle.
Amen, Phil. Amen.
They have one of a human. And when the cherubim take a physical form on the physical earth, they would take one of those faces. So if they reproduced, they would produce, like in the lion case, the lion men of Moab as a post-Diluvian recreation versus the Urmalu that were in Sumeria before the flood. And if you have a raven or an eagle, you would have a depiction of the single-faced eagle ones in Sumeria, known as the Anunnaki. And in some of the reliefs, you see these eagle angels with wings. Some people would call them a different bird. You could call them a vulture. You could call them falcon, whatever term you want to use. It's the bird sort of look. And then you see that same depiction also with a human head and wings. So again, that's the same figure, only appearing with the human face and dark hair, which where the dark-haired giants would come from, just as the lion ones. And with the eagle ones, you have giants in Southeast Asia that are known as the Tengu. And if you Google Tengu, Tengu, you're going to see these warriors and priests that were created by the Tengu gods, and they look just like Nephilim, with only in this case you have a bird head. And also in the Popol Vuh you have the Xibalba, which are owl-faced demigods, and then the house of Camazotz, which is the house of the bat.
Wow.
And if you Google Camazotz, you get a depiction of what Batman's outfit looks like. So there's obviously some sort of connection there as well. And so, like Gilgamesh is a dark-haired giant. And, he's probably from the cherubim line with that sort of dark hair. So when we look at the coat of arms then, when we look at a unicorn, that's going back to a special kind of angelic being. That not only is it this giant horse in mythology that the Nephilim kings and the Rephaim kings rode into battle, and I cover this off in the new book as well, but it's also understood, particularly with the single horn as the allegory, as a sort of a third eye and a connection receiving knowledge from heaven, from a special type of angel watcher. And in the occult, it's representative of an angelic being as well. So now when you look at, to give an understanding what I'm talking about, if you look at, let's say, Apollo's chariot or Zeus's chariot, they have these unicorns that are flying with their chariot. And if you look at the vision that we see in Ezekiel 1, 3, and 10, and God's throne in the vision, and as the Psalms also intersects with it, his chariot is pulled by cherubim. And so if you follow what I was saying a little bit earlier about the fallen angels counterfeiting everything, their thrones of God, they would represent it in a counterfeit way. And that is an allegory for a cherubim. And the cherubim were thought to be not only warrior angels, but also had special knowledge that they would deliver directly for God from the throne, and the polytheist version for the gods.
Wow. Well, yeah. So what I was gonna ask, in regards to that, I know you've said it before that these different, houses, they fight against each other. They're even though they're part of the fallen, they're still at war with one another. Am I right on that?
Absolutely, they are. They're rivals. And there was an interesting TV series and movie series put out by Hollywood called Highlander. And it was from sort of the fairy allegory as opposed to the dragon allegory that I talk about in book 1. And so these are immortal beings that are waging wars with swords, and they're taking heads of the giants, right? And there can only be one that's going to rule the earth at the end. And that's kind of the allegory of what goes on with these royal bloodlines, is that, yes, there's going to be 10 kings, but eventually there's going to be one king that rules the world. And so they have these rivalries, and they all want to be that one family line that's going to have that dynastic worldwide family to reign for their millennium. And so they're all trying to position for that. They have been from day one. So even though they're working directionally to bring about the end time, and always have been, and have been trying to bring about an Antichrist type figure all the way through the beast empires, there's an ordained time. And they know that they're getting closer, so the bloodlines are going to resurface and be really positioning to be probably.
Phil, I don't understand why the channel doesn't grow. It's been stuck on 257 for about 3 or 4 weeks now.
Part of the 10 kings, and then eventually the number 1 king that's going to rule the world. So that rivalry explains a lot of what's happened in the last 150 years. So, before World War I, it was basically a dynastic Nephilim world order. And then what happened with World War I, things started to change. And the secret societies of the West and the Gnostics and the royal families who run the secret societies at the top end of the Thelemic tree, they created something called social masonry. And that was the basis for people like Lenin and Trotsky and all of the socialistic writers that came along. And when they saw a weakness at the end of World War I, they put that virus into play into Russia. And so they took out the Putyanin bloodline. People understand them as the Romanovs, but the Romanovs are a junior offshoot that took over through intermarriage in the 1600s. It's like the Plantagenet is a junior offshoot of the Anjou through intermarriage. So in the hierarchy, an important bloodline, but slightly sort of lower in that hierarchy. The Putyanin was established by Vladimir the Great in about 1000 AD in Moscow, which is why Putin honors Vladimir the Great with a statue, because he's the one who established the Putyanin bloodline and czarship in Moscow. That Putyanin bloodline originated in Kiev as part of the Scythian Rephaim bloodlines, and you can start to understand what's going on with that piece of information as Putin saying he is, and he put this out in newspapers in the early 2000s, that he is a bloodline of the Putyanin, and how that would happen, because his name comes out of nowhere.
Tricky was a very funny guy, wasn't he? I really liked Tricky.
In about 1850. His grandfather shows up, and there's no genealogy before that. There's no Putyanin name Putin name anywhere. And what they did in the Ukrainian tradition there is if a royal had a child outside of marriage, he wouldn't receive the full name and wouldn't receive all the riches and inheritance, but still lead a decent life. And so they would get part of the name. And that's where Putin believes he gets the Putin part of the Putyanin part of his name. And then his father moved at the time of World War I, maybe just before or just after, to St. Petersburg, which is how he ends up in Russia. And so he's trying to put together that old Putyanin bloodline. You have Xi, who comes from the Shah XIA dynasty bloodlines that was created by the dragon creator gods that created all of the dynasties in China, who's in power now. And Shah was the Western bloodline of the Shah dynasty, or the Lees would be more the Eastern name for it.
Wow. So let me ask you this. So as they're kind of warring for that spot to rule the world, to be the Highlander, so to speak, does in your view, does the Bible give us insight into which king is going to actually win?
I wonder how Muffin's going, Wyatt. Pat really loved Muffin, didn't he?
I mean, maybe not specifically, but the region of. I mean, is there any insight there?
The only insight we're going to get on that is through the prophecies, right? So if he's going, you're going to have 10 kings that come as an extension out of the Roman Empire, as Daniel 2 and Daniel 7 talk about. But what's interesting is Daniel 8 provides a little bit more detail that almost seems to connect the end time Antichrist with the person who would become in that prophecy, Alexander the Great, or at least come from that East Empire or in that region. Now, that's a pretty similar land area as Rome, which is it's part of the four parts of that empire that splits up after and rules, but splits in four different sections after Alexander's death. But it's a very similar sort of grouping. So you might say into Greece, but it doesn't say he's a bloodline of Alexander, but he's a figure like Alexander. And in the Alexander mythos, he's the offspring of a human female and a moon, as he shows up as a serpent to have sex with his mother and produces him in that royal bloodline. So he looks at himself as a Nephilim as well, whether or not that's just mythology that's around it. He would look at him as having either started a new dynasty that way, or it was just a mythology to increase the pedigree of his original royal bloodline.
Wow. So what do you think? What do you think is happening right now? Is this? I mean, because I agree with you. You know, we pretty much are in a one world government. You know, or we're headed there very quickly. Does it just keep consolidating down into you know less people having power?
Yeah, but it's gonna take some wars and catastrophes to make that take place. So, you know, look for some of these 10 kings to build their empire and take by force countries. So you can see Xi, you could see Putin doing that.
And Phil, Gary Wayne's very humble. I've seen him go on streams that only had like 5,000 views. So he's very humble. Do you remember he went on Emerald Dreamer's stream?
And also, you're going to see alliances really start to form if things get really rocky in terms of wars, so that they have protection and economic protection. So you see groups of nations in some political alliances, you've got NATO alliances, you've got trading alliances, but I would see things moving more tightly into that groupings of nations as things move on. And we've only seen, you know, the war in the Ukraine and how it's disrupted the whole thought process of what's going on in the world. And you almost see, just with that small war, you almost see a splitting up of an east and a west in terms of 5 kings on each side, right? So, I mean, you've got China and you've got Russia, and you've got the Persians between not only Iraq and Iran, but also the Persians who started India as well. And India is not taking a position and more or less supporting the Eastern one, because they get all of their energy from China for the most part. Germany's going to have to go the same way. So you might see Germany and Turkey assemble together, and you start to look at that, and you're getting a lot of names that are in that World War III Gog War popping up. And so that war is at the time of the 10 kings. So you're going to see groupings like that start to come together, and other groups as well. So
I'm going to interrupt this interview just for a second. Because of you, the Camp Herman listener, a girl is free from human trafficking today. I want you to listen to this quick story, and then we're going to get right back into Gary Wayne's interview. Jason, I had you and AC on a special edition of the Camp Herman podcast a few months ago, where you guys were explaining about your new ministry. You were talking about how you can help real people in real danger that are caught up in human trafficking. And after that show, we did have some people donate some money. And because of that, we were able to assist in getting a girl set free. Could you tell us that story?
We got contacted about a girl in the Middle East who had been targeted by a terrorist sect in the area. and was going to be forced to be married into, their little sect, another imam or Muslim in that area. So I'm going to let AC handle it in full details because he knows everything and what it's going to take to keep her safe, protected. So I'm going to let him divulge what details he can and fill you in on the entire story.
Just like human trafficking, everybody kind of knows it exists, but it's always shoved back into the recesses of our memory because we don't really know what to do about those forced marriages, forced conversions, and which most of the time end very badly. So because we don't know what to do, we say, look, let God handle that.
Phil, I think his channel's been taken down. It's not there anywhere.
Well, most of the time, God then reciprocates and says, well, no, I need you to do something. And this was one of those cases. We have our first case of forced marriage that this particular operative in the Middle East brought me and basically said, AC, you have 24 hours to respond. So the case was, he found this girl and she was kidnapped from her Christian family. She was coming home from school, and when they got her, they were using the strong arm tactics that the Muslim extremists use against Christian families, the minority Christian families in the area, to extract money and ransom and bribery and all kinds of things out of them, of which these people live in all the time. And in this case, they snatched their daughter and demanded ransom. And what we did was we paid that ransom, but also, or actually we paid the parents more than they would have paid. And we paid the rescuers what was needed to get to the girl to snatch her away.
Okay, is that all he's got about Gary Wayne? Oh no, he comes back.
Not an isolated thing. It is happening all the time. And we are doing something about it, digging in our own pockets, if need be, whatever it takes, in the emergency triage level response or reaction. So that's what happened. We got her out, got her safe, and the next step is probably to try to get her family to safety as well.
Now, the really cool part is we can do this again. Please consider going to archangelministries91.com and donating. Every little bit helps. Until next time, God bless. I got a question for you, though, regarding, the one world order and all of this stuff. And it keeps boggling my mind, but I want to say it's like Revelation. It's in Revelation 18. Maybe I'm in 19. But it was where it says that the 10 kings hate the beast, or they hate the lady that rides on the beast.
Babylon. Yep.
Yeah, they hate her. Why do they hate her? And they want to overcome her and get rid of her, right? They want to get rid of the Babylon religion, right?
They are jealous of her power and jealous of her wealth. So the 10 kings don't come together until Babylon comes together. Babylon, we need to understand as a larger entity, so we get a better idea. And just before I explain that, the 10 kings will hand their power over to Antichrist, who will destroy Babylon, as recorded in Revelation 17. And we're starting to see some of the detail that's recording the destruction of Babylon in Revelation 14 in the summary of the last 3.5 years. And we get the full summary of the destruction of, or the full details of the destruction of Babylon in Revelation 18. So what we know about Babylon is that it is a city, because Revelation says it's a city 9 times. So it's a specific city. We need to understand that. We know it's a religion because it's discussed in a mysterious sort of way, as in the mystical religion. It's the mystery religion, mysterion, as you take that back to Greek, and has initiatory rituals, oaths, stuff like that. So, and the allegories of adultery and prostitution are the allegories of polytheist religions that were described as what Israel would do when they backslid into polytheism. So we know Babylon is a religion, and it's the daughter, and being is it comes down in the beast empires, it's called the daughters of Babylon in the Old Testament allegory. And Babylon comes from the root word Babel, out of Hebrew. And so it is the religion that Nimrod had reestablished at Babel and set up an archetypical end time scenario as an antichrist figure under one religion, by having all of the Noahites there. And so we need to understand it as this religion, and that if we understand the beast empires, and I cover them off as they connect back to the Rephaim after the flood, that they're an extension of the royal bloodlines, that each of those beast empires, Egypt, Assyria, Persia and Medes, Greece, Rome, and the end time empire will have the same beast religion, right? And that's the Babylon religion. And so Babylon rides the beast of empires in Revelation 17 with reigns. She controls them, right? And the king is a divine representative of the god and that religion, right? That's a chief representative, and same with the queen as the mother goddess representative, as the visible ones for the invisible ones, from the council of the gods in the throne rooms, right? So you start to see how that Nephilim world order imagery starts to look in terms of how they set themselves up for governance. And so this is going to be part of the end time religion, and is going to control it. So look for Babylon to come first. It's going to take the false prophets as well as catastrophes and wars to bring all of this about. She's going to be the glue that brings about the 10 kings. And she's also is a geopolitical organization as well, because it controls these kings. And it is an economic system, because the world does all their trade through Babylon, and she grows fabulously wealthy. She creates the beast system for Antichrist to take over, which is also part of his incentive to destroy her and set up his own religion, as Daniel 11 talks about. So we want to understand Babylon as a city. We want to, that's going to be located from, that's going to be destroyed. Along with the religion, we need to understand it as a religion, past and present and future. It's a mystery religion, mystical religion, and the religion of the Nephilim and the Rephaim. We want to understand it as a geopolitical organization and a commercial enterprise. And so when you look at it, and as a precursor to the real beast system. So again, the beast is the empire of the end time. The beast is also Antichrist. The beast is the commercial system with the mark that it's going to put in, and the beast will put in his own religion after he destroys Babylon and moves it from what I think is Rome, and I make a very good case for that in the new book as well, and take you through the history of it. And we'll move it to Sodom and Gomorrah, that's allegorically called in Revelation 11, or Jerusalem will be his home, where he's crowned in the temple as the king of the world with the king of Jerusalem title.
Wow. Okay, so let me ask you this. So the one world religion, so we're looking at Babylon, you know, it's multifaceted there, holds different titles, maybe not titles, but holds different, you know, ways that they are doing business, right? But on the religious side of it, and you mentioned Nimrod that brought back the one world religion. So are you alluding to the religion before the flood that the fallen angels taught their offspring?
Yes.
And
so, and when you start to look at some of the other overarching signs of the end time, it starts to make sense, where it's going to be like the days of Noah in all aspects. So that religion would be the same both before and after the flood. And it's the Enochian mysticism from son of Cain who develops mysticism is what's going to cross the flood and be implemented at Babel, with Nimrod being the first recognized grand master of masonry after the flood, a patriarch of the Masonic bloodlines. And so, yeah, you have that Enochian mysticism that is the same as the Babel religion. That's going to be the end time religion. So it's like the days of Noah, and it's also akin to what the book of Ecclesiastes says, that we need to overlay on everything that happens throughout our history, that nothing is new under the sun, and what was will be again. And it just gets stronger as we get closer to the end time, and it's going to come to full extremities in every sort of way in the last 7 years.
Yeah, so it's like that's the birth pain. It's this pattern that keeps playing out again and again until all of a sudden, boom, it's the birth happens. So a couple of questions on the Enochian mysticism part, because I know for a fact that some people, maybe not so much the ones that are on your face group, but some people get they're like, Enoch we're doing the religion of Enoch. Like, what's this Enochian mysticism, or they call it like Enochian magic per se. Can you tell us the reason why we're calling it Enochian and it's not Enoch?
There's two Enochs in the book of Genesis, and what the polytheist forces do is they like to conflate the two into one. And so you have Enoch, that son of Jared, that walked with God and was taken to heaven at age 365. But there's a precursor to that Enoch, and that's Enoch, son of Cain. So we get some sort of idea of what Enoch was all about, and the Cainite line, and some descendants who are also known as patriarchs in polytheism and the secret societies, like Lamech. There's two Lamechs as well. Lamech of the line of Cain, and his offspring, Jubal, Tubal-Cain, and Nama, are ones who are expanding a knowledge base that Enoch, son of
Why? So Emerald Dreamer lost all his channels, did he?
Cain developed. So Enoch, according to those records in the Polychronicon and in the history of Freemasonry, Adam learns a lot of knowledge in Eden to run this agricultural facility that goes from the Nile to the Euphrates. He's got orchards, he's got fields, and when you take the language back to Hebrew, you understand that these were orchards and grain fields, and he had domesticated animals, and doing this all by himself until God actually gives him one helper through Eve. So he would have needed a lot of knowledge to do this. And it's this knowledge that the Gnostics say that Adam taught to Cain and Abel and Seth. And through Abel, he taught that knowledge to Enoch, who developed it into the 7 sciences in an extraordinary way. And then it merged with the knowledge of the fallen angels. And to keep that illicit knowledge and the 7 sacred sciences that we know as the 7 liberal arts today, from the mundane, the Seth line, and the advancements that they were making, we're going to put it into an initiatory organization or a mystical religion. And that's why you have education in degrees, because you have that even in university today. Everything's done with rituals and things that have polytheist imagery all around. I won't go too far down that trail. And out of the mystical religions, are going to develop them into teaching societies for the noble elite only, and that's where the mystery schools come from. So that's why you have initiatory organizations on college campuses today. They have all sorts of different names, from alpha to words like that to skull and bones. So understand it's still part of the whole sort of hierarchy. And this is the religion that they want to say that they developed to a level with the help of the fallen angels, the Nephilim, with the help of the Nephilim, to a level that is going to parade the world into the first apocalypse by water. And so they want to save this knowledge. And so in their history, the Masonic history, Enoch puts this information and religion into 36,525 books, and they bury it under the Great Pyramid in 9 vaults, stacked on top of each other, and a fellow by Hermes, or Hermine, as it's his name is spelled in the Polychronicon, and the legends as they come down through the oral history, finds the 2 pillars of Enoch are the 2 pillars of Lamech. Same legend, just and understand Lamech and Enoch are patriarchs as well in the Canaanite lane, and it has the ability, one to survive a flood, one to survive a fire, because they're not sure that when they start doing the preparation what kind of catastrophe it's going to be. So obviously it's the one that floats or the flood that he finds, and that's the directions to this knowledge that Hermes goes to the Great Pyramid, uncovers it, takes it back to Nimrod, where they start to initiate 1,000 masons to create Babel City and Babel Tower and build the technology into it that they had pre-flood. And we get a hint of that knowledge in that story where it's written in the Bible that with one language, nothing the people at Babel will intend to do will be prevented from them doing. Such is the power of the knowledge. So much so that you could make a case through polytheist traditions that there was a technology involved in the tower that was going to able to let him to go into Hades and into heaven, as Antichrist will do in the end time, because he's an Antichrist figure too, right? And so that knowledge is very, very great, and that's why Nimrod is recognized in the secret societies as the first Grand Master to write the first constitution and implements Enochian mysticism at Babel, from which we get the post-Diluvian understanding of what the Babel religion is. It's the Babylon religion of Babel. It's the daughter of Babel religion out of Babylon and all the other beast empires, and called Babylon in the end time, and goes back to the root word Babel.
Wow. So when Babylon initiates this one world religion, and it's happening, it's going to look like the old Enochian mysticism. Is it going to look more like academia, or is it going to brand itself as, worshiping angels? I mean, if you have an opinion or speculate on that, is it going to look like that, or is it going to look more like it's logical science?
Yeah. So in prehistory, when the great powers are being used, they're presented in images of wizards.
It's unusual they took 3 down at once, though. I must admit that.
Right, magicians, magi. Look for more of that and the prophet sort of aspect to come about it. So the false prophets are going to have extraordinary power as well. And this technology that they're accessing and doing, there's going to be a combination of what you might be able to understand with the angelic technology, and then there's going to be some of those who can use this technology that's far and above what day-to-day citizens are going to have access.
Why can you play music on Rumble and not get copyrighted?
To as we get closer to the end time, and it's going to be presented in a way that this is the knowledge of the gods or the aliens, however they want to present that, and that's where it's going to be a little bit different, because they don't want us to catch on, I don't think, as to what they're really doing. But it's going to be an initiatory religion, because it's a mystery religion. So you're going to see different branches as a universal religion.
Hey, Shawnee.
Levels, they can probably...
No, we haven't heard from Tricky since December the 14th or something. So we're sort of assuming he's passed.
Do local vernacular rituals and worship. But as you get higher up, they'll all have a council of elders that are all adepts for each of the churches that continue to report up, sort of like what you do with the Masonic lodges. and it will all be truly polytheist at the adept level. So look for two different levels, one that the mundane have and the one that the adepts have. So if you look at Freemasonry in that structure, which is the lowest organization on the structure, is you have 3 degrees to.
Why? I'm going to switch to Rumble. I'm going to get Rumble happening. I'm going to download it on the TV, download it on the laptop, and download it on my tablet, and then look in the Rumble.
The old York rite to adapt to it, or 33 degrees in the Scottish rite. So it's the old York split up 11 times. And all the knowledge and the allegories that the initiatives learned, all the way up to 32nd degree Scottish and 2nd degree and 9/10 on the York side, is meaningless. It's just superficial. Might be a little bit of meaning, but it's not who you understand to be the gods that you worship and the true knowledge and the allegories that they've been teaching. You only learn that when you get to at that level. So look at it like that. But it's going to have to be able to reel in all of monotheism. You can look at polytheism around the world, and whether it's Hinduism, Zoroastrianism, whichever polytheist religion you want, they just have different vernacular names for the same gods and some different versions of the same kinds of rituals at the at the ritual level. So it's Islam, it's Judaism, and it's Christianity that they have to fold into that. So it will have a bit of a gloss there at that level. So look for them to draft Moses as being an important figure. And with Moses, all 3 of those religions intersect at Moses. Moses is very, very holy for Muslims. And you get the creation of the Arabic nations through Abraham as well. So look for them to draft him. So the polytheists look at Moses as one of those great people, but not a monotheist. They look at Moses as being educated at Heliopolis into the mysteries, became an adept royale. And then he took that religion, which the Essenes say is their religion of Heliopolis, that went rogue in the time of the monarchy with monotheism. And so they're going to say that went rogue, and they're going to bring false evidence out to say, hey, this was the real religion of Moses. So that's going to be an important figure. They're going to have to degrade Jesus to prophet status, which Islam would accept, and the Jewish people would probably accept, but certainly not as the Son of God. So they're going to have to bring out false evidence to chop that. They're going to have to, and they'll probably say that he survived from the cross and produced some offspring and put some bloodlines in for the pedigree event.
Shawnee, prayers for your family member that's getting attacked by spiritual wickedness.
Antichrist in there as well. And they're also going to have to totally destroy the Apostle Paul, because they believe he's the one who took Jesus
Prayers
from
for
Son of
support,
God status,
Shawnee.
or Son of Man status, to deity status. It's not true biblically, but that's the case that they're going to make. So he's going to be the heretic that the Essenes in the Quran community would talk about. So yeah, you're going to have to see a lot of things done, and it's still going to have some sort of Christian monotheist representation there, just as the false prophet beast, who also receives his power from Satan, has 2 horns like a lamb, but speaks like a dragon. So you're going to see some superficial gloss with that lamb imagery of monotheism. So look for the false prophets to come along and say, if you don't convert to this universal religion, you're going to be destroyed from the face of the earth. Just as Babel came together so they wouldn't be destroyed from the face of the earth.
Yeah. Well, Tori, you got anything?
Well, I was just gonna say, I don't know if either of you have read Frank Peretti's
Oh, she can talk. She hasn't said nothing all stream.
books. They're fiction. They're like Christian fiction, but I actually just finished This Present Darkness, which is probably his biggest one. And he was written in the 80s. But it's so relevant because it's exactly what he's talking about. And so it's like I can just see the ways it's like this small college town that just gets infiltrated by darkness, this present darkness, you know, but it's like spiritual forces of evil, and like professors and like college kids, but it's like there's a secret society with like the politicians and even like some of the pastors, you know, like the progressive pastor and like the
Amen,
police
Wyatt.
chiefs and anyway, yeah, I mean just like insidious is the word, you know, but it's like there's the secret society, they're practicing this like mystic religion, they're channeling demons. It's very like new agey, and it's very like, you know, even some of the Christians in the book are pulled into it just with some of the like, you know, feel like God is in all of us, but not in the way, you know what I mean? Like we're all God's in all of us. And it's like they use this language to pull people in and, you know, like healing and like Reiki healing and all of this stuff. But like, or they have like spirit guide. It's just stuff that like I hear about every day. Like this stuff is becoming normal around us, you know, but it's like someone will have some encounter with like a spirit guide, but then like they see them for who they really are. And it's horrifying, you know, and it's like you're being dragged to hell. And anyway, but I'm just like, oh, this is how they're going to do it.
Yeah, and you know, we know that you know, in Jesus' chronology in Matthew 24, and it's good to add in Mark 13 and Luke 17 and 21 for the additional details, but there's a time where there's going to be a falling away, as Second Thessalonians talks about. That's the scandalizo. They're being seduced away by this religion of Babylon. And with everything that's going on with the false prophets and the catastrophes, and they're going to be destroyed from the face of the earth, you're going to have families turning against each other and turning each other in when this starts to happen. And so there's going to be a lot of people that get deceived with the information that they're going to provide them with, or with us.
Thanks, Wyatt.
And so much so that even the elect would be deceived by the time Antichrist comes, if that were possible. And it is. And so that's why Jesus promises to save us from the time of the year of the Lord's wrath, but also the time of trial, as Revelation 3 talks about, or from temptation. And that's the hour of temptation. That's the hour that is a very important word that Jesus talks about at the hour of his coming. That's the same Greek word, hora. And that's the hour that's used in Revelation 17 when the 10 kings give their power over to Antichrist at the midpoint. That's the same hour that 1 John 2:18 talks about, where there's multiple Antichrists. You know it's going to be the last time. Those are the 10 kings and the Antichrist, and that time where time goes back to hora, hour again. So you can translate it in different ways, but I think hour would have been a better translation there. That's the hour that Babylon is destroyed. In Revelation 14, when you get the summary of the last 3.5 years, and then twice hour comes up again in the destruction of Revelation 18 of Babylon. That's at the hour that we're going to be saved from, because even the elect will be deceived at the deceptions that are coming. So Babylon is going to be strong. Antichrist with producing his Messiah credentials, including saving us from Armageddon, from the Armageddon war that he'll take credit for. It won't be Armageddon, but it will look like Armageddon. That's how strong the delusion is. And you know, you have like the false prophet who's going to be like the Elijah, bringing fire down from heaven on behalf of Antichrist. And you'll have all these other false prophets before who can do powerful things as well. So The deception is going to be absolutely unbelievable. And before Antichrist comes, Revelation 9 opens up, and all of those things out of the abyss come out. It's just, it's the time of the three woes. It's like, we can't imagine the deception that is coming. And so the only thing we can do is learn more, put our armor on, try and help people understand when you start to see some of this coming close together. This is the time. This is the fig tree generation. And I think we're in the fig tree generation, and I think we're in the sorrows right now. We're not at the seals at this point in time, but you start to see things come together.
Shawnee, we won't be deceived. We're up to date on everything. On everything you can be up to date on with the last days, we're up to date with.
With the catastrophes of the sorrows, the pestilence, the famine, the earthquakes, wars and rumors of wars, and then as the book of Luke adds in, probably the surging of the seas. And so that's going to get stronger. And so when we see what's going on in the middle.
And what did you learn about Revelation 11, Vas? Anything, any insights?
At least today with Gaza and Israel, that's just a birth pain. It's not leading us to World War III yet. There's way too much to be developed yet, but look for more of that to come along as well. And so we've got a long ways to go before the first seal produces 25% destruction. Or not the first seal, the seal is opened, and as a consequence of the 7 seals, we're going to get 25% destruction. Those are the same catastrophes. Just as it's the same catastrophes in the trumpets, that's 33%, and the same catastrophes that are in the wrath bowls, which would be 100%, but Jesus shortens and comes in to stop what is going on, lest all flesh be destroyed.
Wow. Hey, Gary, I can only assume that this is why you do what you do, because you've got to let people know what's going to happen, the deception that's going to come. Otherwise, we're toast. You know, if we're just going to church on Sunday, you know, we're not. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're good from the deception. You know, and
well, it's probably preparing us for deception. And I should probably, explain that a little bit. I think good things are taught in the church, but the whole Bible isn't taught. And the context of what they teach isn't being taught along with what they teach. And what I mean by that is they don't teach prehistory or prophecy. So people aren't going to be ready for this. So just when we need our leaders of the church the most, they're going to let us down. So it's up to us to learn about things and to help people. And it's one of the motivations for writing book 2.
He's right. The churches are going to let us down. He's completely right.
Because this is a book targeted at Christians.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's one thing that we mentioned on the show quite often, that like why do certain people, I know Tori talks about this, why do certain people have such a hard time, and they'll just, hey, this is just all conspiracy nonsense. Right, Tori? I mean, we were just talking about that the other day.
Yeah, like why do some people have such a hard time accepting that this stuff could be true, and they just want to like immediately swat it away and say like, oh, you're just,
Well, they want to believe the teachers as opposed to the Word of God. And they've been well prepared to do that. You're brought up in schools to listen to your teacher, not to the parents.
Right.
Your same thing that happens in church, and the priests and the pastors and the ministers, whether it's Catholic or Protestant, their seminary schools do not teach prehistory or prophecy. And they are told, do not teach this. And they are told, you tell people who want to know about that to leave. And that's what happens. And so what they do teach is good, but it's half the story or 1/3 of the story. And yes, faith is all we need, but if the elect could be deceived, and if this is indeed the fig tree generation, they're not helping their flocks. They're preparing their flocks for deception.
Yeah, I really think it's going to be so important. It already is, but like I think it's going to become so much more important to find a pastor and a church community, specifically like the leader of a church who is not swayed by like the social pressure, who isn't answering to someone above him and above him, who, like, I feel like that's what happens. It's like the funding, it's the politics, it's the social aspect. And so they shy away from this stuff because they don't want to get in trouble, they don't want to lose their job.
Well,
So-
I understand the prophecy side. I don't understand the prehistory side. You can either, you either believe in what the Bible says or you don't, and you don't apologize for it, and you don't try and rationalize it away. I understand with how we may not fully understand how prophecy is going to come about, but that doesn't mean we ought not to teach prophecy. I would just encourage people who are into prophecy is try and stay away from the standard eschatological approaches because they are preconceived conclusions, and they do a lot of things that you can recognize that they're preconceived conclusions, and there's many different approaches. And one of them is they ignore inconvenient passages. That's a red flag. If they have to ignore a passage, there's a problem with their approach. If they want to put what Jesus said around what the prophet said, that's a problem. You put all the prophets and all the Bible around what Jesus said, not vice versa. If they apologize or try and reinvent what Jesus said, that's a problem. And so if you put everything around what Jesus said with the chronology that he provides, all the conflicts are going to disappear, including all the Old Testament prophets. So and I explain my approach in the new book, and I demonstrate it in the last third of the books. You can't do everything on prophecy, but you can show how it just fits together, especially with the context of prehistory, which I outlined in the first half of the book. So it was sort of an epiphany for me is I'm tired of trying to apologize for this approach or that approach because I just can't ignore passages that they can't explain. And all they do is they just say, well, it doesn't mean that. What do you mean it doesn't mean that? Here's what it says. You can't rewrite it. Well, they have to try and rewrite it because they can't fit it into their chronology.
Right. Yeah. Agreed. There's a lot of end time systems, and most of them have a bunch of holes in them.
Well, I've gone on some shows, and they said, well, that's all fine and dandy until you get into the book of Revelation. And I'm going, well, what's the problem? It says, well, it's so allegorical and it doesn't fit with USA's Jesus chronology. I said, well, I guess that would have to be impossible. And they say, well, why is that? I said, well, because it says right in Revelation.
Why? Do you have to pay to be involved in Rumble?
1:2, that this is the testimony of Jesus Christ given to the angel to provide to John. It cannot contradict with what he said. It has to fit. It just has to.
And so it.
Hey,
so
Jay,
either
good to see you,
adds
mate.
to what he already said.
Yeah.
I mean, is that safe to say? I mean, if it doesn't
Sure,
make sense, because it doesn't make sense in their system, but it must add to something that he's
Oh, Rumble's free. Good.
said before, or give more insight on it.
Well, it does give a lot more detail on some of the because he gives us a template in his oration, and that gives us a lot more of the detail. So, and if you look at, Revelation uses, it's pretty much linear. It's got a couple nuances in it where you have what's going on in heaven in preparation for what's about to happen on earth. And you've got the seven churches that are before the start of the end time. But I would also submit.
I'll check it out,
people
boy.
that
Thanks.
it also has an overlay of prophecies that hasn't been fulfilled in the end time. So it's kind of like a dual prophecy that I explain in the new book. And that once you understand the separation of the seven churches, and then how you get about at the last 7 years with Revelation 6 starting, either just before or just after, And then right up to Revelation 14, halfway through, that's the first half. You get a summary for the second half, and then you get the details of the second half in Revelation, starting in Revelation 15 through 19, and then you get the millennium. And it uses a word for the order that the events are coming in. We get it as and it's hahi in Hebrew, and it means, at that time it's the when. It happens immediately after. That starts to really erode at some of the rewriting of chronology that some of the eschatological approaches like to use, particularly as you roll into preterism and into the millennium, and how it just doesn't work when you take it back to understanding the Greek. And Jesus uses a similar kind of word, but more definite, because it's the blueprint. And it's the Greek word toda, and it is the when. It is then. It is at that time. And he uses it in all three of the orations in Mark, Luke, and Matthew, and it's giving you the chronology. So just let it fit. Just slide everything in.
Nice. Yeah, I totally agree.
So like the very last paragraph of Revelation, and yeah, people forget Revelation is a book with red letters, so like Jesus's words in it, but just is the very last chunk of Revelation. I, Jesus, have sent my angel to testify to you about these things for the churches. I am the root and the descendant of David, the bright morning star. The Spirit and the bride say, come.
Yeah, I got some
And let
mates
the one
coming
who
up
hears
from
say,
Sydney.
come. And let the one who is thirsty
Yeah, got
come.
to run to the
Let
room
the
for the
one who
weekend.
desires take the water of life without price. I warn everyone who hears the words of this
Motor in Lake Haven.
If anyone adds to them, God will add to him the
No,
things
not
described in
today.
this book. And if anyone takes away from the words of this book of prophecy, God will take away his share of the tree of life and in the holy city, which are described in this book. He who testifies to these things says, surely I am coming soon. Amen. Come, Lord Jesus, come. The grace of the Lord Jesus be with all. Amen. So, yeah, like pastors cannot be taking away the words of Revelation,
Yep, they cannot. And then there's some approaches that would say, well, in the book of Revelation where John is taken up to heaven, that's a sign of the rapture. I'm going, really? It doesn't say rapture there.
Okay.
And by the way, it's, I like to inform people that he's in
Sorry, Luis.
a vision at that
You
time.
done it?
It's like we have a lot of prophecies
Thank
in the
you.
Old Testament where visions are.
You seen
You
Squeezy
wouldn't
yet?
do those as rapture. So he's in the spirit of the vision that he's receiving. He's not being raptured. Oh, and let's see, what else does he have to do? He has to deliver the letters to the 7 churches when he comes back. So you're saying he's raptured and then he come back and then he's going to be raptured again? It's like you're adding information in there that's not there to justify a timing. Let the Bible lay out the timing. Don't rewrite it.
Yeah,
Amen.
makes me think of the Princess Bride, and he's like, you keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
And the way I read the Bible, we don't get raptured until Armageddon.
Good rapture. Maybe.
Yeah, that's really good. So Gary,
See you, Luis.
if you don't mind, we're gonna go ahead
You
and
too.
wrap up. We'll just go ahead and package this as just a regular podcast. Is probably on our end something that we didn't do. We didn't let enough people know. So we apologize that nobody showed up. But I want to ask you something in closing, because you gave such an eloquent case of the Nephilim world order, and just in light of, everybody's talking about it, in light of the Tucker Carlson Roseanne Barr conversation, I think we can search this video and get an explanation of the New World Order and Nephilim.
Yep.
Because Roseanne Barr said that they were the Anunnaki from outer space, and she told Tucker that. And here you are, you eloquently laid it out using historical.
Exactly, Shawnee. And how can you have tribulation saints if we're all raptured? How can we have tribulation saints? I think we are here till God come, till we're on the brink of defeat at Armageddon, and Christ will come back and rescue us. I think that's going to be the end. He's not coming before that, and we're not getting raptured. That's just my opinion.
text and, prehistory that is, well known. So I thank you for that. Now, why couldn't it be Anunnaki from outer space? Like, where would that?
Vas, one of them trumpets dries up the Euphrates River. The Euphrates River is already dry now, and there's been strange sounds heard in the sky all around the world, like car horns going off. Example, trumpets.
That even come from?
Well, that comes from the ancient alien mythos. And,
Yeah.
You have Sitchin.
Not us, Shawnee.
All of those, other writers. I'm trying to think of the name of the writer of Chariot of the Gods, but anybody who watches the History Channel will know Ancient Aliens. And so Anunnaki is looked upon in the alien mythos as being a type of alien, right? So advanced alien, and they're the ones who come here according to Sitchin writings and create humans through DNA technology and types of animals that are already here. So in the alien mythos, is what they do is they lower the power and being status of angels to just being advanced aliens. And you can call Anunnaki accurate as aliens, except when you start to really add on to it, because they're not of.
That's true, why they were not appointed to wrath
Of the physical world. They were spirit beings from heaven. And the ones that she's referring to are the fallen Anunnaki. And the Anunnaki of Sumeria, as the writings talk about it, have the Anunnaki as watchers. And again, in the alien mythos, they will call them watchers, but alien watchers. But these are the watchers, just as watchers shows up in the Bible. In Daniel 4 times, Ayir, watcher. The second part of Sair for Satyr for a degraded fallen seraphim watcher, a goat god. And watchers are 4 groups of angels that are surrounding the throne. And they are the sons of God, as well as the watchers are understood in the book of Enoch to have produced most of the giants. Anunnaki in Sumerian mythology also mated with human females and created Anunnaki of the earth, watchers of the earth, giants. Gilgamesh would be a classic example of that, as being the son of this from a female god at this time, a goddess, the fertility goddess Nin, and Lugalbanda, king of Uruk. I go through a lot of this in the new book as well, and the Anunnaki also come from Nibiru, and they translate Nibiru as a different planet. And again, each of the
Okay, so Gary Rain's on board with Nibiru. I didn't realize that.
old languages, their words would have multiple meanings, so you have to select the right choice. It could mean a planet, and it does mean a planet in the context, but the planet, it's in a location. Nibiru is in the planet that is Earth. And it also means the underworld. It's as in Hades, as in the other world, as in Anwin, as in Argatha, as in Sheol. And that is where their home is. Not on another planet, but in the planet.
They're right here.
They're right here. And so Sitchin, I mean, he translated directly from the cuneiform tablets. And he was no doubt a genius, but he was also a Gnostic and a Freemason. So he has a biases that he's used there, and to mislead people. And most of the other experts, and you can take experts at whatever opinion they want to do, but they don't agree with that as being a different planet whatsoever. And where it's used, it's being used in conjunction with underworld settings and descriptions. So the context would suggest that that's been just another reimagination of the text. So there are Anunnaki, they are coming back. They probably will disguise themselves as advanced aliens, and there's a hierarchy to the aliens, just as there's a hierarchy to the angels and their spirits offspring. And so expect that to be all part of that watcher alien sort of deception. So just as we're starting to see information come out about aliens and UFOs, expect that they're going to twist that information.
Huh? Right.
In preparation for all of these beings that are coming back and will be walking amongst us again, just as they did in the days of Noah.
Well, yeah, they have enough people, enough apologists, I guess, talking about it, like Roseanne Barr and the ancient alien guys of, when this does happen, this is who they are. And then you have us on the other side that are like, no, we actually have the deeper and more true history than even you guys have. And I guess that's why they got to take us out. That's why they got to get rid of the Christians, because we actually have a more coherent explanation.
Yeah. And sometimes the Anunnaki are also called the Gidgee gods of heaven. And I'll also take that back in the new book, because I really like to get into this stuff. I'll take it back to the Sumerian word for eye, as in to watch, which makes up most of the word Gidgee for the watcher. So again, if you let the language, in whatever language, support itself, it'll be relatively consistent coming out of prehistory in terms of what they write about, simply because they weren't making it up. They were writing it down, and we just have to understand that nothing is new under the sun, and we're going to see these beings in the not too distant future.
Agreed, absolutely. Anything in closing, Tori, you got for Gary Wayne?
I would just like to add for Gary Wayne and for anyone else who's listening. So like in the book, This Present Darkness, I just think, this stuff sounds really bleak. It sounds like we're up against insurmountable odds in the future, but we're not. And the prayers of the righteous remnant are so powerful, and like our prayers move things, I believe, like in the unseen realm and seen realm. And anyway, it matters. And
See them people on Flacker. Apparently, I've seen interviews with someone who was straight after it, and they said great evil entered them when they had Flacker. And if you see the way they roll around, I think that's the spirit of demons, the giants, trying to control the body, but they don't know how to. And that's why they flop around so much when they're on Flacker. Okay, I got Gary Wayne's one on the Bilderbergs now.
I bought 3 of these to protect my family from bed bugs. Let me tell you, I love our old home, but it's impossible.
And he has a new book that's coming out, and I know everybody, my audience will be super excited for that. Gary, go ahead and introduce yourself, and also tell them about your new book.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me back on, and so much looking forward to the conversation tonight, and to talk on topics that will overflow into book 2 as well. So yeah, book 2 is been long awaited. It's been on the advertising mark by Amazon since last October for pre-sale, and it's just the printing is so backlogged, like everything else with COVID. I think it broke most things, and so there's a lack of labor, a lack of paper, and a lack of printers. And so they started actually printing in December. We got into the queue in November, and then it has to go through, the size of the book has to go through different levels of printing. In other words, they print sections at a time, then they have to bind it together. So first shipment was shipped 3 weeks ago, and retailers got inventory that was sold out. There was another one that went in right behind, another print run going after that. My books are lost, but I'm hoping to have them tracked down and into my hands for early this coming week. So yes, the Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 2, how understanding prehistory and giants helps to define end time prophecy. And this book is targeted specifically at Christians. Awesome. And it is a book that is as unique as book 1, but different. So there is no other book on the market out there like this.
There's no way this book would be a dud. This guy's too clever to publish a dud book.
And, you know, I said I would never write a sequel to the Genesis 6, but what happened was the audience convinced me I ought to do this. And it took me a long time to sort of listen to that. And then, you know, to actually write a book this complicated, it takes a little bit of time to do that. So it was actually finished and sent to the, you know, the publishers for editing and everything else about a year ago now. So it's been that long in the process. So this book is unique in a lot of different ways. One is if people are fans of Dr. Heiser, and I can't say I've read his books, but I've heard a lot about him and all the good things and the work that he does. This is Heiser on
Phil, I just checked on Messenger. There's no link there about a song.
steroids. And it's Genesis 6 Conspiracy 1 on steroids.
Nice.
And it's specifically targeted to Christians. So if you want to know more about everything the Bible that has this, I should say everything, I'd say 98% of everything that the Bible has to say about prehistory from a completely biblical perspective and taking it back to the original Hebrew and Greek as well, and also etymology of words. This is what that book does. So not only will I list all of the giants that are listed in the Old Testament, I will link them back to patriarchs. In other words, the first giant that's the tribe was eponymously named after. I will cover all of the hybrids and take them back to the giants. If people aren't sure what I'm talking about, that's a tribe that is created from a Rephaim and a human female, or a human male with a female Rephaim. And so people aren't familiar with that. Does that actually happen in the Bible? Yes, it does. And I walk people through it. And the quickest example on that, just so that people know what I'm talking about, is in Genesis 36, which is this really odd addendum onto the Table of Nations, because they're talking about giants and there are no giant patriarchs like Arba or Rapha in the Table of Nations in Genesis 10 or First Chronicles, but you have Eliphaz, son of Esau, brother of Jacob, marrying Timnah, daughter of Seir the Horim giant, Rephaim, red-haired, pale-skinned giant, to create a new dynasty of the Amalekites, the hybrids, versus the original Amalekim that they took the name for Amalek after, who show up in the War of Giants hundreds of years before in Genesis 14, and there's also different pockets of the Amalekim giants that they covered also in book 2 as well. And they produce a hybrid set of giants. These are 7 to 9 feet tall, just like the patriarchless Canaanites.
Wow.
Have a Rephaim patriarch. So I cover all of that off. I cover off the complete angelic hierarchy. I cover off all of the wars of the giants, Genesis 14, all the conquest wars, and then I transition while highlighting all of these interesting things out of prehistory into setting down a chronology for end time prophecy and using those terms so that people can see how prehistory connects into prophecy. And I also put in that transition some of the things I didn't do in book 1, particularly on secret societies, when I'm going to put in the Jesuit order this time, because I think I put out enough information now that people can sort of understand the hierarchy, and the Thelemic tree, which is the organizational structure of the bloodlines in the secret societies.
Wow, man. All that information right there is just amazing, and it's stuff that people need to know. We need to see how Satan was working, back then and how he's working now, and I think it's very important, I'll go over a few verses before we get into our subject tonight, but everybody, please check out Gary Wing's Genesis 6 Conspiracy first book. This is a lot to swallow. Believe me, I always like to reference this when I go into secret societies myself. When I start studying those or coming out with an episode, I like to dip in here first to make sure I'm on the right track. So and also his next book, please, guys. I mean, that's just a little taste of what he's talking about.
How many authors do you know that are digging this deep? How many authors do you know that hop on shows for free and just go? I mean, he's blasting shows out left and right. So, guys, it's amazing.
Yep.
Please check.
Like I said, I've seen him on a site with 5,000 views, 5,000 subs. He's very humble, Gary.
Check it out. But I'll go with this one first. It's James 5:12. Okay, it says, "But above all things, my brethren, swear not neither by heaven nor by earth, neither by any other oath, but let your yea be yea and let your nay be nay, lest ye fall into condemnation." Okay, so no oaths. Okay, absolutely no oaths. I did do an oath to join the military. Okay, this is before I'm fully saved. I'm swearing an oath and I'm just repeating it and I'm not even knowing what's going on. So I am guilty of this as well. I don't like to act like I'm Mr. Perfect. Okay, so I am guilty of oaths as well. But this is basically
oaths aren't a sin.
Yeah.
We're just told as Christians not to do it. So if you do swear an oath, then you're expected to fulfill that oath.
Okay. Thanks for keeping me.
Yeah. So, and you will be held accountable for the oath.
Yeah.
Whether you fulfill it or not, or what the oath was to.
Yeah, amen.
Okay. Yeah.
So but within the army, I mean, you're swearing allegiance to the country. That's not a sin either. But the problem is, and the reason why we're told over and over and over and over in the Bible not to swear oaths is because that's the system of this world.
Yeah.
So that and I think you get the oath-based system starting to be implemented and certainly sort of red flagged as an incident that happens before the flood, in the time of secret societies and the creation of giants and the Enochian mysticism I talk about in first book, which is the original pantheon, with the oath on Mount Hermon, as the book of Enoch talks about, where they took the oath of Herem anathema. I walked through all of the etymology and connect this back to the Bible in book 2, and it's an oath to carry it out to the end, no matter what the consequences. And this is the oath that they go out and they create the giants with, because they want to destroy the Adamites from the face of the earth and make sure that they're not going to reach the destiny that Yehovah, the Word of God, created the Adamites for in Genesis 2. So this is the system that comes down into the religious pantheons, where they swear oaths in the degrees, and as to become an adept level, you swear an oath to the specific chief god of the pantheon, as well as to other gods, and you might even swear oaths as a giant or of the bloodlines to a specific celestial mafia godfather that started your tribe and bloodline, and also the kings and the queens, just as King Charles swore an oath to a specific god that provides his divine right to rule from Mount Hermon, from the Baalim council after the flood. It would have been El and the parent gods before the flood, but this is after the flood with King Charles, obviously. So that's the oath-based system that comes down through our whole world. It's the legal system. It's because Satan is the prince and the god of this world, and they've instituted this whole system. So that's why they created, King James Version of the Bible, so they can have people swear oaths in the courts. They have you swear oaths in almost everything as a reflection of the legal hold that they have. And once they get you to an oath, they know that God expects you to uphold that oath or be held responsible. So doesn't mean that God can't free us from these oaths.
Yes.
And the best example of that is Moses, because Moses gets adopted into the Rephaim beast dynasty at that time, raised as a son of Pharaoh, educated in the mysteries and polytheism at Heliopolis, becomes an adept before adulthood, as all bloodline families and members are. And then after he gets ostracized, he finds God, and God has done all of this obviously to prepare him for what he has to do to go back into Egypt for recognition, talk the language, the whole politics sort of end of it, as well as doing the hard stuff of convincing Israel to follow him into the desert. But when Moses dies, who's there to claim the body?
Satan.
Satan
Yeah.
is. And
Oh, yeah.
God sends Michael
So
to
interesting.
intervene.
Yeah.
Satan had legal right over
his
the body, which is why he's there. But God sent Michael to trump that because
Wow.
that was part of what he wanted Moses to go through in preparation for the Great Commission that he ultimately fulfilled.
Wow, dude, that is so interesting. All I have to do is mention one verse, and I get all this knowledge just dropped on my lap. That was amazing. So, all right. So this episode, I'm gonna learn my lesson next time. This episode is gonna be on Trilateral Commission, CFR, Club of Rome, these think tanks, guys. Okay,
Yeah.
I just wanted to have Gary come out and kind of explain these because you see these pyramids. I know you like to do the tree. You see these pyramids, and within the pyramid, you always see this little block that says Trilateral Commission, CFR, Council on Foreign Relations, and Club of Rome. They're always like kind of this little block, and I would like you to kind of go over those, and then I have some questions, and whatever. I know that you know your stuff, so you just go over it and just crush it, and I'll do my best to keep up.
Yeah. So CFR is the Council on Foreign Relations, and people have heard of that.
It's no conspiracy that these things exist, guys.
Yeah.
Just let you guys know. They all exist 100%.
So, but who are they and what do they do? So it is one of the lower levels of branch organizations, but above the debt level. So on the polemic tree, Freemasonry, Illuminati, Rosicrucians, Committee of 300, Council of 13 families. So Freemasonry's at the bottom. And typically they're going to be drawing for the CFR is through, and CFR is a U.S. organization as opposed to the Council on Foreign Relations, which would be the British format that was created at the same time and is essentially associated with the Bilderbergers as well, as you sort of link in, and the Bilderbergers as a more senior level on a global scale. So Skull and Bones is an organization that most people might be aware of, like Gore was Skull and Bones, Bush is Skull and Bones. It's at the Ivy League universities to put these pseudo blue bloods into the mysteries and prepare them. And the Skull and Bones is basically a stepping stone to the CFR, to the Council of Foreign Relations. And so the Skull and Bones is kind of a bloodline of the Illuminati. So they're higher than the lower levels of the Freemasons, but they're not purebloods. But they do work with a senior branch of the CFR. So it's not unusual in secret societies that you would have a senior level and a junior level. So if I could explain that in terms of like the original one that
Yeah, Shawnee, gamey meat, it's not very appetizing. I'll agree with you on that. And kangaroo meat, it's very tough. It's like chewing leather.
I could find in modern times was the Templars were the junior order that were fully established, even though they're founded in 1099. They were officially established in 1118 with the crowning of Baldwin II on a small priory on the Rock of Zion. And Huda Payan then becomes the Grand Master going forward there as a splitting away of the senior from the junior, and the Priory of Sion would be the senior order of purebloods.
I see.
Right? So that's kind of how these organizations kind of work. So even the Bilderbergers have a senior order and a junior order. The Club of Rome has the same sort of format. So when we look at the seniors, they would be royales like, the Windsors, or families from the Bilderbergers, so the Dutch families, the Bourbon family, some of the black nobility families, and of course the black nobility of Italy. So as
It even
people who are
sounds
being
tough.
educated in these Ivy
Australian Retirement Trust is a super fund.
Okay, that's not me, that's them.
Are you still there?
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm still
we're
here.
Yeah, it said that host you had muted me, so
Yeah, something happened right there. I am so sorry.
that's okay. I just
You were on fire right there too.
I wasn't sure.
Boss.
I didn't mean to mute you. Definitely sorry about that, guys.
That's
Everybody
okay.
that's listening, I apologize.
And so, yeah, so if I can pick up my train of thought, so the
I'm so
Ivy
sorry.
Leagues are bringing in these young people and giving them direct sort of entry levels into these think tank and political organizations that are going to set the international policy of the U.S. for the world. They're going to be working on that continuously. And the CFR is also the doorway through if you wanted to get to the trilateral.
Phil, we have Australian restaurants that serve crocodile. I've never tried crocodile. I would try it, but yeah, I haven't tried it yet.
Trilateral organization. And so you would have all of these subgroups, and typically the CFR has 2,670 members, and it's limited. And so there's new ones coming in and cycling all the way through. And then you also have, like I say, the representative of the bloodlines, which is the senior order. And one of the ways that you can sort of connect this organizational structure and this legacy is that the insignia of the Skull and Bones of the Illuminati, people supplying for the CFR, their insignia is the Skull and Bones or the Templar flag or the pirate flag. It's all one of the same thing. And so you have in the original sort of founding of this is a mixing of European elite that includes the Bavarian elite, just as the Illuminati is connected in there as well. And then you have junior black nobility as well operating at the top level. And these are the ones, like the Medici family, for example, Venice, Florence, ones that came over from the Middle East in about 1000 AD, and we're working at the commercial and banking end of the black nobility versus the senior, in terms of the Italian black nobility, the senior level, which is the plebeian and patrician lines, are the ones that go back through Augustus and Julius Caesar, back to the senators, back to Romulus and Remus, and back to the gods that produced Romulus and Remus. And that would be called the Juliet gens of that bloodline. So when we're talking about these bloodlines, they all sort of kind of intermix. And so the upper order has about 500 to 600 members only that is associating with it. And again, only 15 more might be moving in and out per year at the top level. And these are the world's senior sort of elite. So they're going and intersecting sort of back up. And so the CFR, you would be seeing them going into not only the Illuminati as one of those organizations, but through the senior order, through the Committee of 300, as they would sort of double intersect in terms of the branches on that. So, but it's only because you have the royal bloodlines that are participating with the lower level adepts.
Yeah, so I love how you go through all that. Like most people, I've never even heard about the senior, junior level. The way that you broke that down is so interesting. For example, guys, like he was talking about George Bush, like George Bush Sr. When he was in high school, he was he was in the Skull and Wreath Secret Society at Phillips Academy, right? So he comes out of that, right? And then he goes into Baylor University. He joins the Nas Brotherhood, right? So that's another secret society. Then he goes to Yale and he joins the Skull and Bones. And then he comes out and and you can check his resume, George Bush Sr., and you can see, you probably have a lot more information on this. You even have it in your book. But what he's saying is all these people that get tapped for these secret societies in all these different colleges. I mean, if you look up college secret societies, you'll see them all over the different schools. Okay, not just Skull and Bones, but there's all these ones. So they're all getting tapped and then brought into the Skull and Bones and all these different secret societies in college, and then they're getting prepared, is what he's saying, for these upper level positions.
And not only would they be participating in influencing politics as advisors, but as you say, they're running think tanks, and there's just a leviathan or web of think tanks that they're all involved, that it's driving this whole echo chamber to get things moving in the right direction. So the CFR is a more recent society that was set up, and it was through President Wilson on the U.S. side, and the CFR came about in 1920, 1921, depending on how you want to look at that. And they also started to publish their own newspaper with this, and still is around today in a little bit different format, and it's the Foreign Affairs newspaper. It's the establishment policy for the elites. It's like when they're connected, just to understand the level of connections that they have. So, and the reason why it's important to connect Wilson in is because he's a progressive.
Yeah.
And people think progressive is something new. Progressive was the Western branch of National Socialism.
Yeah.
And it's the same policies, the same belief system. And he had set up this League of Nations, just as after World War II, you get the United Nations. And they're trying to do, even back then with these organizations, they think they're very, very close to the end time, that they can act.
There's a castle in Belgium or somewhere like that where they've got a little temple built into the castle, and it's got 1,000 lights in it, like 1,000 points of light. They go into this temple room in this castle, and they're doing 1,000 points of light.
Actually bring about
Can't remember the castle though.
Religion and world government, and that's what they're directing. This is a globalist ideological organization, just as the trilateral organization was designed to get the three major Western powers involved in Japan, Europe, and the US at the time in the 70s when it was created, to somehow speed up the globalization movement, because the polytheists are absolutely frustrated that they can't get it done. And they've been frustrated for over 100 years. They've been thinking that they're that close. So if we look at the Council of Foreign Relations in Britain, they were working through the Commonwealth in the same way. And obviously, if you go back before World War II, I mean, they were the power, right? You had a transition going on that World War II established US as the major world power. But before that, it was the Commonwealth. And so it was very important to have that. And the Bilderbergers at the senior level, which are working in the bloodlines in Europe, but also the bloodlines around the world and the secret societies around the world, they're working that sort of aspect. So they're like the continental senior order of bloodlines. And always look at how the Europeans look at the US. The US are the attack dogs.
Yeah.
The US are used to drive their agenda. They don't care about your wealth. They don't care about your...
Yeah, sure, you got auto-corrected, Shawnee.
your lives. You're the ones that, the US is the ones that are told to belly up, spend the money, fight the wars. And
as we notice, that happens.
And they sit on the sidelines. And
we're like the military branch of we would say like the Illuminati, basically, right?
Yeah.
And then the City of London would be like the Commonwealth. Not London, but the City of London, right? The bankers. Well, you would tell me. I don't want to say.
Well, no, you're absolutely bang on. You keep continuing.
And then the Vatican is the religious part, right?
Yeah.
So they're, it's just we got to see. And then what do you see in each of these places? In Washington D.C., you see a giant phallus, right? It's the Washington Monument. You see a giant phallus in Rome. You see a giant phallus in the City of London. It's all over, you know. So
Yep, they mark their legalities and their rule in plain sight. And you know, it's important to know that Washington City was created and was created as a Masonic city. And it's absolutely loaded with sacred geometry, celestial alignments, and polytheist worship of their pantheon. So it's important to sort of understand how the world works. And the U.S. was created, and I covered this in book 1, was as the Templar dream to bring about the world government. And it was going to be a model of how it would look, where you had independent states working with one strong central federal government. And it was going to be the leverage to be able to move the world in that direction. So they were very well ahead of their time with their plans. And that should absolutely open up people's eyes to know that this is not just a transgenerational.
yeah, you gotta see the stuff
This
that's
has been going on for thousands of years. In the last 1,000 years, they've been plotting this whole plan, this whole march to world government.
Yeah, people have to see, man. It's like I had family members from my wife's side go to Washington D.C. They're from the Philippines. They have no idea. They came over to visit me, and they're like, "We just came from Washington D.C. The Washington Monument was beautiful. Check these pictures out." And my wife was looking at me like, "Don't even get into it." I'm like, I gotta say, let me tell you guys about the Washington Monument real quick. It's 6,666 inches tall. It's 66.6 inches, wide, and I just had to go tell them the Bible's actually down here, and I just when you start, once you are aware of this type of stuff, I opened up a can of worms to them. But once they found that out and they see that,
Yeah.
and then they could Google it and even look it up, they see it in a whole different light. And we always thought it was just Protestant Christians coming over here. That's how everybody tried to make it seem, but really they're worshiping a whole different God, as you could tell.
Yeah. So, in their founding doctrines of the CFR, here's the paraphrase of why they were created. Goal was to bring down borders, open borders. So you see what the progressives continue to do. Progressives then, progressives now, establish world government and funds leadership of global groups and societies. So it is like a stream of money coming down through the royales through these. And these royales have more money than people think. There's something that's called on the books money and off the books money.
Everywhere is like that. Huh?
Yeah, and so people think that people like Bezos or Musk or Gates are the richest people in the world. Small potatoes.
Yeah.
And so much so that if the Davos crew, which also answers into the Committee of 300, the Thelemic tree, were to be able to pull off the Great Reset, these oligarchs, these pseudo blue bloods that are trying to intermarry through their children and generations to move up in the bloodlines. That's the price that they pay for going to these meetings, like the Bilderbergers meetings and things like that. In the Great Reset, they too would lose all their money.
Yeah.
But they would be funded by the bloodlines, and they would run the world after that. So they would make it back very, very quickly. Now, when I was doing research, when I was writing book 1, and I wanted to have an idea, what is this off the books money? And you start to learn about Switzerland and the banking, and that's another rabbit hole in itself. But
we've gone over it a little bit on our show, yeah.
Yeah. I, at that time, was told by several sources, and the numbers would be somewhere between 3 and 500 trillion back in about the year 2000.
Wow.
Was the off the books money.
Wow.
That they held. So that would be 10 times more, maybe even more. I don't know, because they don't lose money on the markets because they don't have to be in the markets, but B, they get out before anything happens.
Well, they know exactly, and they can create a problem to make the market go up or down, like like maybe making something like a vaccine. I don't know, but so also something in a smaller window, like you see the Crown Estate, which is they own 6 billion acres of land. It's worth like $30 trillion. That's just an example of on the books money that might not be the Windsors for sure, but it is something that is we can actually look into. So that's 30.
Phil, the Chinese do a dish called Peking duck, and it's stuck with this sauce they've made up from Peking. It's a delicacy. It's expensive, but it's really nice.
Trillion right there. So that's big money, but we never hear about this. When do you ever hear that the Windsors own the Crown Estate, or that the City of London owns the Crown Estate? We never hear about that unless you dig.
Well,
dig.
And they are the Crown.
Yeah.
So it doesn't. You can parse it off. Well, the government owns it, or this.
That's what they try to do. Yeah.
Yeah. But they're the Crown.
Yes. They own it. Yeah.
They own it. And still, even if you add all of that in, you still don't see the wealth that they're hiding in Switzerland, which is why they created that location.
And they made it so this neutral money, so everybody that it has that type of stuff, they could put their money there, and then no one's gonna know. The Vatican was doing that as well. Making deals. They have a Vatican Bank as well. Doesn't the Swiss actually guard the Vatican Bank? The Swiss military.
So, and in book 2, I'm going to cover off the Swiss banking, and I'm going to cover off the Jesuits and how the Jesuit banking moved to Switzerland through the royal bloodlines and secret societies. And even the Rothschilds, which was the banking set up outside the church, they moved their head offices and wealth to Switzerland as well. And
from where?
The Sun Doctors Skin Cancer Clinic.
Yeah.
Just calling to confirm your appointment on Tuesday.
It's at 10:45, isn't it?
9:45.
Oh, it's close. Okay, I'll be there. Thank you.
Okay, we'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye.
Most of the Templar wealth that was in France at the time of the fall of the Templars went to Switzerland under the protection of a sister organization called
I haven't had Goose Wire
or the Hospitaller.
Yeah, we had a show on that with you too, and that was amazing.
Yeah, and with the White Cross, which is the Swiss flag, sort of manifested, and that banking there started at that time because the Hospitallers actually started up there about 100 years previous to the fall of the Templars. And what's interesting about the story in terms of how the secret societies and the bloodlines get control of the Vatican banking is it begins with an order called the Montesa Order by who is at the time of the creation of the Jesuits, run by Francis Borgia, one of the black nobility.
Why? Funny you say Goose is greasy. Duck's got a little bit of oil in it, actually.
The bloodline popes and at Basque, and he is going to become the third Grand Master of the Jesuits in 1565, and by 1571, between him working with the Bourbon bloodline, have got control of the banking, and they move it to Switzerland.
Yeah, man. See, you guys see how it all folds down. So this is the stuff that people don't get to know about, don't get to hear about. So yeah, these are such deep stuff, man. Like a lot of people concentrate so much on the president of the United States or something like that being powerful, and look at the stuff that's going on behind the scenes,
And then what the CFR did in the 70s, we talked about them, is they actually were the ones who organized the creation of the Trilateral Organization.
Yeah, which is the Rockefeller. One of the Rockefellers was was part of that as well, right?
Yes, and the Rockefellers fund significant amount of money into most of these groups as well, as part of the stable of agents of the Rothschilds.
Yeah. Man, crazy. So, for example, like Ronald Reagan, for example, this is just like grabbing a random president. It says that he had 28 CFR members in his administration,
Yeah.
10 Bilderbergs, and 10 Trilateral Commission members out of the 59. Okay, so
Yeah.
you just see that, like, and then Clinton, for example, Clinton and Richard Nixon had over 100 CFR members in their cabinets through their whole presidency.
Yeah.
So they're just picking these people,
That's why they call it the uniparty now. I mean, people are finally starting to wake up that they control both parties and they control the policies.
Yeah.
And so it's always moving in that progressive movement. And when the Republican establishment
Yeah, Shawnee, duck skin's not like chicken skin, is it?
comes to power, they're never pulling anything back that the progressives ever put in place. Things move at a little bit slower pace, and you get this sort of, okay, well, we got some breathing room there, maybe we can get some changes, and then it's like, Lucy and the football and Charlie Brown, it gets tugged away, and guess what? The radical leftists are back in power, and they're back moving the goalposts again. So it's also one of the things when you think about how populist politicians have always been thought of as evil and should not be permitted. And it's anti-democracy is the disinformation that they put out on it. And it makes absolutely no sense. Populism is the absolutely essential core of democracy. But because they can't control the grassroots of populism, they have to stamp it out. So if you wonder why the whole world rose up against Trump, because he was operating out, even though he may have come out of progressives, he may have even come out of the bloodlines, but he was not permitted to run for president.
Yeah.
For the Democrats, so he chose the Republicans, and I think his policies have been quite good, actually, for the most part. But understand that when he went that way and decided he was going to turn the Republican Party upside down and inside out and replace it with his populist movement, that's something the left-wing fascist hegemony cannot let happen.
Yeah, that's why that makes sense. That definitely makes sense of why that why they would do that, but it almost seems like but he did do some things that us as conspiracy theorists probably wouldn't agree with, like Operation Warp Speed and stuff like that. So there's, it's like they're all good. I think they're all part of the team, even though he was doing stuff that and his stuff is great. You know how it is. You're not going to be able to get in there if you went to BBC or
at least he's not persecuting Christians. At least he's not persecuting Christians and conservatives.
Yes,
and
I agree.
It's not that Trump. And here's the flip side to what you were talking about in terms of agreement on that flip side, is that Trump never said he was against the New World Order.
Yeah.
He said he wanted a larger role for the U.S.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want to be answerable to the bloodlines who wouldn't let him and fund him to power. They were never going to let him go to Bohemian Grove and get initiated and chosen. So they have to stop him. And if you look at what's going on with the geopolitics of Putin today, and I'm no Putin fan by any stretch of the imagination, he's basically saying, I'm not against the New World Order. I want a larger role. Xi in China's doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So
good night, Wire. God bless.
Back to the European understanding that they're trying to impose on the world. And if we get lucky, maybe the U.S. will be pushing back more after the next set of elections. If not, I think we're on a fast ramp to destruction. But
yeah, I mean, honestly, I think the same thing. You could see it happening, so we'll see, man. And so if you guys all out there want to, I think a good place to start for me, and this is basically me learning from Gary Wayne, like I did research. I started just looking at all the high school secret societies at first, and then I went to the college secret society second, and then you start finding the notable members, and you start researching each one of those, and then you find out that those people, like for example, the Skull and Bones was started by one of the president's dads, right? And then all of a sudden Woodrow Wilson becomes president. So there's just study like that. That's how I did. And then what happens is I started finding out all the notable members that ended up going to these 8 notable high schools that are like preparatory schools. And then that's how I did it. That's how I started doing it. But I'm nothing like Gary, obviously. But it's just that's a way that I kind of started digging into it and finding out that it keeps branching off.
It's always the same pattern. So once you start to understand the patterns, you start to see how things work, and you can dig deeper. And unfortunately, it is such a large organizational structure at so many different levels. It's just mind-boggling, and you can just be forever researching them. But
that's why you can write a book like this thick and then write a second one, because there's so much you can dig into
and still not cover it.
Yeah, because for me it was mind-boggling even just looking into the secret societies of high schools and colleges and finding out what CEOs and these people are. Like I said, man, I think that presidency and all this stuff is chosen. 2004, Al Gore versus, or I'm sorry, this is going to be George Bush was going against another Skull and Bones member. I have it all in my notes, but I don't have
Gore and Bush were both Skull and Bones.
Yeah. So we have that, and it's just you guys just see how it's going, and I just love how you dig deep and how you're able to do the senior, junior, and exposing this type of stuff for us. It's really we need it. We need that. Ephesians 5:11. We need to expose evil, right? And don't be in the fruitful of darkness or whatever. So yeah, I just love the way that you do that and pull it out. So and then so you have Club of Rome as well. Like I know we kind of went over Trilateral. We kind of went over CFR. So like Club of Rome, like what is up with that one? Did you have some information?
Again, they're kind of a more recent organization, created in the late 60s. And they were created again because of this impatience of, World War II had happened. They had wiped out between basically the same war of World War I and World War II. They wiped out the Kaiser bloodline from the Western European bloodline domination. Germany would be central. Habsburgs were reduced to and lost their empire. The Tsars, the Puyanin bloodline, which the Romanovs were a junior offshoot through intermarriage starting in 1600 of the Puyanin bloodline out of Kiev, which was considered too much of a rival and too pure of a bloodline compared to the Western ones that were less ennobled and less pure. And they took them down, just as they took down the Xi and Li bloodlines of the Shah dynasties in China with the same social masonry. So you look at National Socialism, communism, that's all part of the Western secret societies. It's the virus that they created to take down some of their rivals so they could impose their position on the world. So you think, after World War II, they're almost going to get a free run, but it doesn't work that way. So they start coming up with new organizations like the Trilateral in the 70s that I talked about, and then Club of Rome preceded them. And they're an organization that is one step higher than the Bilderbergers, and from a different branch. So higher up of the branch as it goes into the trunk organization, one step higher. So the Bilderbergers are all royal bloodlines, right? So this is significant. But again, they have a senior order and a junior order to it. So when I was growing up, and I was born in 1958, so we had a prime minister come to power in 1968, and about the time of the creation of the Club of Rome. And he comes from a first-line family in Canada, from the original settlers of France to New France or Quebec.
Yeah. But in our country towns, they're getting really hassled by the kids doing crime, and the kids are actually filming there and putting it up on YouTube, and it's a real plague. We're besieged by not me, but some towns in the country are besieged by crazy wild teenagers.
is a bachelor
And the government's doing nothing about it.
at that time. And then, and I'm going to come back to that in a second. And so he has been a communist starting in the 30s, maybe a little bit earlier, right out of college.
Amen, Shorty.
He says he never, he says he moved more to the center and he joined the Liberal Party, but he always ran as an extreme left-wing candidate and has best friends with Castro, family friends with the Aga Khan, even to this day. Trudeau spends vacations with the Aga Khan on his island, and that's the leader of Sufism, which is the mystical part of Islam. And they were showing on the CBC on the national news. I saw it twice when I was young, and I was only, if it was, say, 1969 or 70 when he was going in, I'd be 11 or 12 years old. And they were showing him going into the Club of Rome meetings, but he's not high up, so he's part of the lower end, and he may be lower level of bloodlines, and he would have been some sort of adept or new money and rising through the lower levels. And so there's a veracity to, for me, in terms of this organization.
And Vas, that's exactly what the kids are doing here.
That I was remember seeing it and thought, that's really odd. Why is our prime minister going into a Club of Rome meeting?
Yeah.
Like, what's that all about? Of course, I didn't know. So when we look at this group, it has less than 100 members. So it's a very specific group, and they were created to speed up this process again.
Yeah.
That's the frustration level. And so they claim to hold the keys to peace and prosperity. That comes obviously through world government and their belief system that they want to impose, which is polytheism. And that they created things like, people might be aware of some of these things like peak oil. That was their scare. Of course, it was never any such thing as peak oil because there's lots more oil out there. Overpopulation. Yeah. That's from them. Global warming is theirs.
Oh, wow.
It's all made up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Now I know which one to blame for that. That's hilarious. Club of Rome, huh? So
yeah. And so the upper order that they report to is guiding them. So they come into these meetings and then they go out with their marching orders from the lower end. So you're going to have with the Club of Rome, which is going to have an intersection with the black nobility because it's located in Rome. And if this is the senior order of the black nobility that is sponsoring a lot at the level. So the Club of Rome would answer in at the lower level into the Rosicrucians, which the Rosicrucians are 50% pure blood. But of course, the senior order is going right up to the Council of 33. And you could say that's going to include some of the 13 families, fine. But technically, through the organizational structure, it's the Council of 33 for the senior level. Now, one of the things that they did was they divided the world up into 10 groups of empires, similar to the one that the UN did, but slightly different. And those are the 10 zones that they want to have 10 leaders running.
Yeah.
This is the new Atlantis that Francis Bacon, a Rosicrucian, one of the, I guess, first sort of groups of academics in about 100-year period or so, as you have the Invisible 33, which were the Rosicrucians. They create the 300 families below that, and then the Rosicrucians below that, and that's where you see the elite. Whether or not it is Da Vinci or people like that are going to be the Grand Masters of the Prior of Sion, that's a separation from the royals, from, let's say, somebody like with the name of Sinclair or something like that. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Pierre Trudeau, shortly thereafter, these meetings and stuff, he marries Margaret Sinclair of the Sinclair bloodline out of Scotland, who created Freemasonry.
Wow. Yeah, I remember you.
That's how they move forward. And so Trudeau today is the bloodline of the Sinclairs, which is the St. Clairs out of France, which is the Rollo bloodline that expropriated Normandy. And the treaty in 910 to 912 to give the land to the Norse bloodlines, to the Rollo bloodlines, was called the Treaty of St. Clair, where they adopted their name from.
Wow. And I wanted to make a correction when I was talking about Skull and Bones. So it was actually Alfonso Taft helped create the Skull and Bones, and then all of a sudden his son is William Howard Taft. So he was a Yale Skull and Bones member, and then he became president, and he became chief of staff. I just want to let you guys know that because I made a mistake. I said Bush Wilson probably because it just came out like. Yeah. So man, just interesting. So and then the two people that went against each other too. I want to make a correction too. It was George Bush versus John Kerry. George Bush was class of '68. And then John Kerry was class of '66.
Yeah.
Skull and Bones members both going against each other for president.
And we wonder why we had perpetual war.
Yeah.
That's the Uniparty. That's another sign of the globalists, because that's how they get to a world government. So, and these 10 regional governments is based on the Atlantean Empire before the flood, where Poseidon, fallen angel, God, marries climbing, creates 10 demigod Nephilim kings. That is the golden age in the center of knowledge, technology, religion, arts, and is trying to conquer the world to create this Nephilim
Our battle hasn't even started yet, has it, Vast?
world order under one dynasty before the flood, which is one of the reasons why the flood comes and sort of starts to get you thinking about there's more to the violence than just violence. This is, they had the technology to destroy the world with the violence and the wars that they were doing, and they would have done it because that's what they were created to do. And so Francis Bacon's new Atlantis is this end time world where you have a universal government, you have a universal religion, and you have science that works in harmony with religion, because mysticism is created from the 7 sacred sciences and the illicit knowledge given from the fallen angels. It's a knowledge cult. And so Atlantis as 10 is very, very significant, that they want to create the days of Noah again, when the gods walked amongst us and giants walked amongst us. And the days of Noah included 350 years after the flood, when the Rephaim were created, where again the Baalim, for example, walked amongst us, created the Rephaim, as they talk about in book 2, and show you how they created the Rephaim. And that's the world they want to bring about in this new Atlantis. And biblically, Daniel 2 talks about these 10 toes, which are 10 kings of the 7th beast empire.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that actually.
Yep. And Daniel 7 adds in the 10 horns. And just as Revelation 12, Revelation 13, and Revelation 17 has the same 10 horns of this 7th empire, noting that Assyria and Egypt, one of the prophetic allegories, would be the 2 older beast empires. And you can also use Daniel 8, which just adds more information and gives you the 7 empires, only starting with Greece before that split up, Rome, which comes after, and which was part of the Greek Empire, and then the end time empire. So it's yet up to the same number either way, and using both prophecies gives you more information for the end time.
Do you think they're trying to set up the end times to happen? Is that why they do this? Like,
yes.
Or is God just using them as chess pieces?
Yes, they're doing that
they
exactly.
Want to bring about the end time before the ordained time. They want the showdown with God. So the Spurious were created as in illegitimate, outside of ordained marriage children, Spurious, and obviously from the Celestial Mafia Godfathers. And human females, they were created to, as I mentioned earlier, to wipe the Adamites from the face of the earth. And they believe, because they believe in the gods that they follow, that they can win this war.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. And even more so, they're created to do the things that the fallen angels don't want to get blood on their hands on. So you do not hear biblically or anywhere else that I'm aware of where you have the gods or the fallen angels slandering the God Most High or the Word or the Holy Spirit, or sinning, talking in a blasphemous way, because they know the power of the omnipotent. So they use their spurious offspring, the giants and the descendants of the giants, the whole nobility elite throughout our history, to slander God and to do their will and to enslave humankind and to cause perpetual war. And they also use their spurious offspring to bring about this great sort of end time war that they believe that they can win. The problem is the fallen angels want to destroy the earth, and they want to win a settlement with God to have the earth as their realm and then to renew the earth later. So if you understand the doctrine of Shiva, who's a destroyer god of the Hindu pantheon and as associated with the technology and everything that's going on at CERN, that is a destroyer god that is also a creator god. And it creates a new world, or renews the world out of the ashes and the destruction of the old world. They don't want a world for Adamites. They only want a world where they can create Blanketarians, or dwelling places for the spirit, for their spirits offspring, or disembodied spirits.
About 4 o'clock,
a whole
man.
different world that spirit is going to be put into a body in whatever world that they're going to create for it. So this is also the same doctrine as, sorry to keep ranting on about this, but I wanted to just go into one more about the secret societies.
Dude, keep going, bro. This is amazing.
Doing the religious and the secret societies, because they're the same organization. The secret societies come out of the mystery schools that were educated for the elite in prehistory, and in the theology or the philosophy, the love of Sophia, the goddess of Gnosticism and wisdom, created the secret societies through the initiatory organizations of the mystery schools, which is why you have all of those initiatory schools that your organizations and schools that you were talking about earlier. So the same analogy for coming out of the secret societies is the phoenix coming out of the ashes. So they want to bring about this end time, but before the ordained time, to try and slander and slur God. So they're always working through their offspring, which are the visible ones on the earth, who run this earth, just as the invisible ones operate from the council of the gods. They want to bring this end time about before the ordained time. And that's why they're so impatient, because they know the time is running short and they got to get it done. So they keep doubling down and doubling down. And that's why they're the perpetual war party of politics. They've been perpetual war throughout their whole creation. Giants were warriors. They fought between each other. They wiped out humans. They've done this throughout our history, and they've used us as their pawns.
Yeah, and that's why you can see so much evil, and that's why you see so much evil within just the governments and everything that we're talking about. We see the evil happening, but no one can ever put their finger on it, and no one can really do that unless you break it down to a spiritual level, like Gary's doing right now, taking the conspiracy and showing how it relates to the Bible in the purest way. And it's just amazing when you get into this stuff, and it rattles my mind. But that's interesting. So is that why God creates a new heaven, new earth, and he's just like, just a new heaven, new earth comes down and just crushes this one, or what do you think?
Yeah, we have to go through the millennium first, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of a humbling thing for humanity, I think. So just as fallen angels were already created immortal and knew God intimately and knew how powerful he was, they still rebelled.
Yeah.
So after Armageddon, Jesus is going to set up his kingdom and reign for 1,000 years, and Satan's going to be locked in the pit prison. Then after 1,000 years, he's going to come out, and people are going to rebel again. So it's that, I think it's closing off all aspects that, yes, we've been selected to be the resolution to the angelic rebellion, but understand, if we don't have the laws of God written on our hearts, so to speak, as the Bible talks about,
We're going to fail.
we're going to do the same things as what the fallen angels did. And so after you have the judgment and all the names that were written in the book of life from before creation had a chance to leave their name in that book or have it blotted out, that is the numbers that are going to go forward into eternity as the inheritors of eternity, to be with also the loyal angels. And so there's going to be something new that's created after that. We don't know what it is. I mean, this is a physical world. It's a different dimension, that heaven, but God is going to be with us in the new heavens and the new earth.
No
And
sun.
Yeah.
No sun, because the Lamb is so bright, it'll light up. And read that, guys. Revelation 22. Read it.
It is the permanence that comes in versus the non-permanent that was designed to have angels and humans and hybrids have free choice to be part of what's coming or not. So it's going to be something we don't understand, something completely unique. But I mean, he created everything from nothing. So, I mean, how powerful is that? He knew the beginning from the end. How powerful is that?
It's almost like he's creating the Garden of Eden again and making.
Shawnee, all these 33rd degree Masons and people like that, they actually think they can beat God. They literally think they can beat God.
Yeah, so that everything is kind of back to those same rules, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is amazing. Well, Gary, I think you did an amazing job. It's almost 10:30. I don't want to keep you for too long. I think, did you touch on everything you wanted to touch on as far as on the ones we're going to go over tonight? Did you have some more notes you wanted to bring? I think you were like, honestly, like so much knowledge right now that you laid out. It was amazing.
Well, you know, the Bilderbergers are one that sort of links in here as well.
Okay,
right?
yeah. If you want to go over that, no problem.
Yeah, just we'll spend a little bit of time on them. And again, you have a junior order and a senior order. So you have the Royals that we've talked about. And I won't go through all the different family names. And then you have the new money that are called in once a year to the Bilderberger meeting, right? And it's a secret, and there's a specific agenda. And so the new money, those who want to intermarry into the bloodlines, have their children intermarry into the bloodlines like Pierre Trudeau did, they are brought in, and then they're given their marching orders for the next year. It's like the Davos crew as well. Also, you know, these, which links into the Committee of 300, they invite the people there, and then they get their marching orders for the year, right? They're all working on the same sort of long-term agenda. And this was created in 1954. And so you had the royal family and Prince Bernard and Juliana and Victor Rothschild, who are the ones that are saying we need to create this CFR for the world, right? And it's a senior order. So they were brought together, and they're the most powerful figures in the world. So it's more than just European bloodlines that are working here. Now, the organization isn't funded by the bloodlines. It's funded by pseudo-blue bloodlines, the Rockefellers, and the Ford Foundation. So all of these foundations that are set up, they funnel their money. It's like laundering it, and they're all tax-free to fund the globalist agenda.
Wow.
I mean, everything is fixed for their causes. And so the Bilderbergers are the senior part.
Yep, history repeats itself. I know people say it don't, but history repeats itself. especially in the Bible, because it repeats itself for let it be established with two or three witnesses. Well, if it repeats itself twice, that's letting you know it's legit.
Of the CFR. So they have both under their wings, right? And so they're a very, very powerful organization. And again, their agenda is to bring about world government.
Well, awesome. I'm glad you went over that because yeah, we need to definitely hear about that because the Bilderbergs it's so secretive. It's very hard for someone like me that's not as experienced as yourself at researching to find this type of stuff out.
So when you hear that the Bilderbergers were also founders of the Trilateral Organization, understand that the Bilderberger families are part of that senior order of the CFR as well. So you have the lower order and the higher order working together. And then from the lower CFR order, you have people funneling into the Trilateral Organization as they get rewarded.
Yeah, is there any other think tanks that you could think of besides the ones that we went over?
Anything that's a think tank,
yeah,
is funded by secret society.
Okay, guys, that one was over. There you go. Where is it?
Welcome to the Sharpening Report. I am your host, Josh Beck. Tonight we have a very special episode for you. We are welcoming back to the show Gary Wayne, author of The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, How Secret Societies and the Descendants of Giants Plan to Enslave Humankind, and The Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 2, How Understanding Prehistory and Giants Help Define End-Time Prophecy. And that second book will be the topic of tonight's show. Glad to have you back, Gary. How are you doing?
Well, doing pretty well, and very happy to be back, and looking forward to talking about the book a little bit more. And it's kind of an important day. It's got the official release out there today for my book. So I was able to pick up a Kindle version on it last Friday off of .ca, Amazon.ca. .au had it available, .uk had it available, but not .com. So some people have already bought some of the digital versions, and also there went up over the weekend 3 5-star ratings, so a pretty good start from that.
Yeah, that's great.
Now for Amazon, they've already started shipping the book. I've been getting emails with pictures and pictures on Facebook of people who bought through Amazon or other people online, and so they're starting to receive them. I have not received my books yet, so anybody listening to this, and I'm going to be trying to get some information out on that today, seeing as how this is the official release date. My books for my inventory were shipped 2 weeks ago. They were supposed to be shipped a month ago, but they opted to ship all of the books off the first print run to the retailers because they were oversold. And so a second and third run I've had. So my shipment left about 2 weeks ago, but I don't have them yet. They're lost somewhere. So we're trying to track them down, probably caught up in customs. So it's the only thing I could think of. But to date, and we've been tracing since, I've been trying to get my publisher to trace since Thursday. We don't know exactly where they're at. All we know is when they shipped and who they were shipped with. And so much turmoil at the printers right now that they're not exactly giving us the information that I would desperately want, because I want to start to inform people as to when they can start getting their books.
Yeah.
Good night, Phil.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully that all works out soon.
Good night, Phil. Guys, I'm out after this as well. This has got 30 minutes to go, and then I'll be out as well.
And it's a phenomenal book from what I've been able to read. And what's really cool is you offer excerpts of the book if people want to check it out before they buy. People can go to Genesis 6 Conspiracy, and that's the number 6, Genesis number 6 conspiracy.com. And you can check out the book there. Last time we had you on, we have 7 sections in this book, and the last time we had you on, I believe we dealt with section 4. So I wanted to skip ahead a little bit because we can't give the whole book away for free for everybody. I want people to pick this up. So I wanted to skip ahead to section 6, which is prehistory,
Good night,
history,
Shawnee.
and prophecy.
Yeah.
And you have a short description here that says, post-Diluvian history was shaped by the 6 beast empires and will once more be shaped by the end time 7th and 8th beast empire. So let's start right off the bat with chapter 58, and people don't feel daunted about there being so many chapters in here. It is packed with information, but it's really easy to read, and I think people will really like it. So let's start with Pharaoh and the beast empires. What are these empires, and which Pharaoh are we talking?
Sure.
Okay, this is only 5 days old, guys. What did I do wrong?
How to invest with as little as $1. With Trading 212, you can buy fractional.
Sure. Yeah. So section 5, which we didn't cover off, is an extraordinarily terrific section for Christians, and it leads into section 6. And what's in section 5 is all of the giant wars after the flood that are discussed. They're fighting against giants and all the way through the book of Judges, and all the way through King Saul, King David, and down through King Solomon. And the important thing to remember is, as we talk about moving into section 6 is a transition from prehistory. So the first part of the book was designed to walk through prehistory, give you a lot of information that's in the Bible, deeper than any other book that's out there on the market today, start to highlight important words, terms, and concepts that are used in end time prophetic allegory. So once that's done, then I start to transition to a section 6 into the last section, which is all prophecy. And this is going to continue with what was done in the first 5 sections, but in the transition mode. So it's partly history, partly prophecy in a lot larger way. So in section 5, Israel coming out of Egypt is in one of the beast empires. So the beast empires, as I explained throughout the book, are the dynastic bloodlines and the sort of embryos of the Antichrist wannabes that are coming to power. And so we have Michael, who fights against the beast empires, but not from them rising, as the book of Daniel talks about, but to ensure Antichrist doesn't come to power until the ordained time. So all of these beast empires are trying to present an Antichrist type figure. So Israel, in its concept and creation, is going to be intimately connected throughout its history with the beast empires. So it grows up, and there's 7 beast empires, as we learn in the book of Revelation in chapter 12, 13, and 17, which is an add-on to the 5 empires discussed in the book of Daniel, Daniel 2 and the metallic empires, and Daniel 7 with the beast empires, where I draft the term beast empires, and Daniel 8, which is also talking about beast empires, but with a different additional piece of information to what the book of Revelation is talking about. So you have 7 empires in Daniel 8, but it comes through adding in for more information about the Antichrist and the end time empire through that sort of understanding through the Greek Empire. And so Alexander would be that first empire in that prophecy. You would have then the empire, the beast empire of Greece, that is split up into 4 empires. Rome will succeed it, and it's also part of the Greek Empire, one of the 4.
Diane, at least that guy's getting called out for saying that. How wicked is this? Really, it's bad.
And so now you have, that is 6 empires, and then the last empire that is a direct extension in an allegorical form from the Greek Empire, and Alexander rises in the end time, so 7. The other allegory that is understood is that you have Assyria and Egypt as the 2 beast empires. So you can use Nimrod and Babel or Assyria, whichever one you choose. as being that beast empire. And Israel is connected to all of these beast empires. So it is raised into a nation in Israel. And then God frees them through Moses out of that beast empire. So there is an intimate relationship there that they grow from inception into full nationhood. And then Assyria is the first one of the beast nations that are going to act against Israel in a way that is from the curses of the Holy Covenant. So they're there, and they would take all of Israel and the southern kingdom, Judah, into exile, except that the southern kingdom repents. So it's just the northern kingdom where the lost tribes, where the tribes get lost into the nations. And so all throughout history, you have these beast nations interacting. So now the next one is Babylon, which takes Judah into exile. And then Persia, Medes rises, and they permit them to go back and build the temple. Greece rises, which we already talked about, and they actually do a form of an abomination and dominate Israel. And then Rome comes and does the diaspora and destroys Jerusalem and the temple in 70 AD. All the way through, they're interconnected with Israel. So it's an important context to understand end-time prophecy, and accordingly, those beast empires rise as or an extension of the beast empire, and it rises in the end time with the seventh empire. They're going to be intimately related to the fulfillment of Israel and Judean end time prophecy. So in section 6 of chapter 58, we're talking about Pharaoh and the beast empires. And this is really from a conceptual basis, and then specifically with some passages, particularly in the book of Ezekiel, about Pharaoh as one of these Rephaim bloodline beast kings, understanding that Egypt was the first of the beast empires. But for example, in Ezekiel 32, where I'm going to be talking a fair bit about in section 6, this is the passage of the terrible ones. And the terrible ones is the Hebrew word erit. And if you put ones on there, which the translators have inserted for plural, that would be eritim. And it means all sorts of words that would describe Rephaim kings. They're strong, they're powerful, they're tyrants, with a few other interesting add-ons, which is we've talked about, I think, a little bit previously in the book.
Wow, Diane, 50,000 since February. Man, they've got to be fed, they've got to be housed, and you guys are nearly bankrupt as it is. Wow.
Is that they were childless and had fertility issues, which is why they had to intermarry with humans. And that word erit is the root word for the Ugaritic text. So Ug, erit, that's the city of Og, as I explained earlier on in the book. And Kiriath Ugarit is how it would be understood, just as you have Kiriath Arba for the city of Arba. So Pharaoh is talking to some interesting people in Ezekiel 32. And there's two groups. One is the terrible ones, and one are the mighty, which is the Hebrew word El for angels. And he's talking to them in the pit prison. So they're actually communicating to him in this prophecy, whether it's actually literal or it's just providing us context. And I look at this as part of a dual prophecy, which I think we've also talked about, that has significant meaning in prehistory. So you have the pit prison and things going on here. You have the prophecy as it's applicable for the
Matchmasters is awesome. I love playing against real people.
You suck at this game.
At the time of the prophet, and also for the end time. And these terrible ones, when you go through the list of those names, like the Assyrian or Meshech and Tubal, these are important kings for the end time, particularly with Antichrist, and particularly with the Gog War, where you have Gog, chief prince of Meshech, Gog of Magog, chief prince of Meshech, in Ezekiel 38 and 39, which is the war that I think is the counterfeit Armageddon that Antichrist rises to power on. That is equivalent to Joel 1 and 2. Joel 3 would be the Armageddon War, and Revelation 9. And so this is part of that sort of great sort of deception to accept Antichrist. So he's a beast king in that wannabe bloodline dragon messiah, like the terrible ones that are in the pit prison. And they're called the terrible ones because they did terrible things to humankind while they were on earth, and they were killed, likely beheaded, which I cover decapitation off of how that all connects in here in book 2. And those ones are sent to the sides of the pit, in the pit prison. And these are the ones that are talking with Pharaoh. Like, it is an absolutely scary, frightening, I guess disturbing, something that might send cognizant dissonance if you're not into the preternatural nature of the Bible as to what's going on. And that these are the ones that are going to be released in the end time, along with the mighty, the fallen angels, El, the Elohim, small case, E, when the pit prison is opened. And then I connect these allegories back to Pharaoh and in Ezekiel 32 in other chapters with Pharaoh, so that you understand these are all about the same concept in terms of the time of the prophet and for the end time, and some of the interesting allegories that go with it. And I also have a chapter that I go through the details of the terrible ones, just a couple chapters down in chapter 61. So this is a terrific sort of transition because it's transitioning so much into the end time, and it's giving you those a lot of names and terms that you're going to need for end time prophecy.
And that, yeah, excuse me, that's absolutely fascinating because, you know, a lot of times we try to piece together how this timeline works. And I think you've done a phenomenal job. Right before that chapter on the terrible ones, you have a chapter called The Mysterious Trees of Eden. What did your research bring up there?
Well, yeah, so in these trees of Eden in Ezekiel 31, you have the Assyrian tree. Well, that makes no sense, right? So it's one of those understandings of the dual prophecy is that it gives you important information of prehistory for context. And it's also talking about empires and individuals at the time of the prophet, and also an allegory for the end time. So the Assyrian, there's no way that could be in Eden. That's before the flood. It makes, so there's something else going on. These trees of Eden are, and we know there's 2 trees, but these are separate trees. The 2 trees that we're told about literally are the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But now you have all of these other trees. And this Assyrian is a tree, is an allegory for Satan in Eden. And when you have all of these branches and the covering and everything that is falling underneath his covering, is talking about Satan in the end time, and then how that connects into the beast empires is a significant sort of understanding of this tree allegory, because as I get into this section, I have a chapter 69 called the Thelemic Tree. And that's how the polytheists, they always try and graft things in from the Bible in terms of making their counterfeits. So the Thelemic tree comes from the Greek word thelem, which means God's will. And so in the occult belief that you have free will and, you know, to do anything that you want, is where they sort of take that that meaning from, and then they mistranslate it a couple times in a sexual nature. And I'll identify those in that chapter as well, to give you the 2 examples there as a marker for them, because they believe in free sexual will as well, whether it's with them on earth or the angels and their free sexual will. And this Thelemic tree is the will of God, but in their understanding, the will of their celestial mafia godfather, or the pantheon of gods, however you want to sort of understand that. And the Thelemic tree is broken into 2 different trees. that I walk through, and this sort of gets into some of the secret society stuff, but it's important to understand what they believe and how they want to bring about the end times. So they have the genealogical tree, which is one of the thelemic trees. And so in that concept, that is like this elm tree or an ash tree or an oak tree. And understanding biblically, ash and elm are kind of used interchangeably, and oak is the holy tree of the Tuatha De Danann and the Datanu, and that the oak and the ash are part of the trees of Mount Hermon. Just as the oak is used to describe the Amorites in terms of their strength in the book of Amos 2. And this is from their what they would call their gene of Isis, a genealogical tree, and that they have specific genses. So LB gens, which I covered in book 1, which is kind of the royales of the Europe, but more of the northern aspect, and into England and France as well. You have the Julia gens, for example, which is the gens of the black nobility of the Italians, which goes back to the patrician families and Augustus and Caesar, through the senators, back to Romulus and Remus and the specific gods. They have lots of different allegories, not only the gene of Isis, but the fairy gens or the elven gens. This is the gens, and this is the genealogical tree that they track. So that's their invention. And I also take you back where that comes from the incredible line of the kings of Jerusalem crowned in 1118 in a small priory on the rock of Sion. So it gets really sort of a lot of intrigue going there. But the more important one is the organizational structure, which is a cedar tree, an evergreen cedar tree from Mount Hermon. And in that you have the roots, just as with the ash tree or the elm tree, has roots that's going into Sheol or Hades, which is their heaven. That's where they get their power from. So genealogical, that's the gens sort of source, but the cedar of Lebanon, the cedar of Mount Hermon, is the power and the authority. So just as all of the kings received the divine right to rule from Mount Hermon, that's the source of their power. So you have all of these different trunk organizations, which I give the hierarchy, which I kind of outline in book 1, but I give you the specific from the 13 families down to Freemasonry, and then I show you how the branch organizations intersect into that thelemic tree, and then where they take that thelemic tree back in their occult history and when they start to introduce that. These are their terms. Now, taking that back, understanding of how important trees are, as in the world tree, which is again part of the allegory of the thelemic trees. All these trees in Eden are angelic trees that they're talking about. And the most important one is Satan and his beast empires that extend out of that. And so the occult forces take those two terms and they form their hierarchical structure and their organizations on earth to do, as they say, is as above, so below, because they believe in that type of what's playing out here is the same thing that plays out in the other realm.
That's interesting. And so do you think that that's going to have to do with the end time one world religion? And will these figures that you write about, called the great and mighty men of the end times, what will they have to do with that as well?
Well, yeah. So one of the intriguing things about the Bible is it's written in 2 languages originally, Hebrew for the Old Testament and Greek in the New Testament. And whether or not they were trying to translate from Aramaic or Hebrew, as there, I mean, I'll leave that up to other historians, but what we get is Greek. And so it's very difficult to get the cognate terms in sort of that's exactly the application, because you're looking for context and say, how does that link into the Old Testament? It has to fit. So for an example, so in the New Testament, when it has affliction and tribulation, for the tribulation aspect of, Revelation 7, Matthew 24:7, Matthew 24:21, Mark 13:19, for example, you can see affliction or tribulation being used, and the word is the Greek word thlipsis. And it's used for two different kinds of tribulations, one for the saints, one for the tribulation of the world not seen since the beginning. And we know it's the same word because where it says in Matthew 24:21, the great tribulation of the world not seen since the beginning of creation, Mark 13:19 uses the word affliction there. Exact same parallel prophecy, and both of those words go back to thlipsis, just as affliction or afflicted does in Matthew 24:28, and just as tribulation in Revelation 7, the tribulation saints goes back to thlipsis as well. And that has a Greek word. That Greek word thlipsis has a cognate word saras, transliterated starting with a T in the Old Testament. So in the time of Jacob's trouble, Sarah, they're going to be saved out of this great tribulation. You can start to match things up, and that's the same word troubled, Sarah. That's when Daniel rises in Daniel 12, which is the midpoint of the last 3.5 years when you have the war in heaven. So he has sat down by inference, and Antichrist has come to power if he is the restrainer, and I think it's a good possibility he is, him or the Holy Spirit. I'm good either way, but seems to fit better with me now. Whereas before I used to be on the Holy Spirit side, but now I'm more on the Michael side. Antichrist has come to power. So you can start to use some of those words to say it's marking chronology and it's the same meaning, just unfortunately in two different languages. So if the giants are going to have something to do with the end time, then we ought to be able to match up terms from the Old Testament with the New Testament. And that's what chapter 62, the great and mighty men of the end time, is about, is say, how do we know that the kings that are being talked about in Revelation are the same bloodlines or kinds of rulers that were in the beast empires before, other than we know there's a beast empire of the end time, but is this exactly in the same sort of model? And so I make those connections. So, for example, in Joel 1-3, you have the words mighty one being used, just as in Ezekiel 39. And in both of those applications, this is the counterfeit Armageddon and Armageddon as you get into Joel 3 and in Ezekiel 39. These are the mighty ones and the passengers that are connected to the Rephaim through the Hebrew word abar and Passover and crossover and death, just as sometimes Rapha is 7496 for spirit, demon, shade is associated with death, as in the book of Job and a few other applications. So you have these mighty ones that show up in Old Testament prophecy. So I start to connect those to the words that are used to describe these kings in the book of Revelation. And there's two key words that are used to describe them that are in Greek. So mega and megastranes. And so I start to trace those words back, provide their full meanings and their etymology. And as you take them back, they are going to mean words like, say, mega, for example, is going to mean great, as in great stature, in great age, in mass, in height. And as you take that word as it goes back into the etymology through, I like to use Webster's for my etymology, large, huge, chief, weighty, bloodline descendant. I mean, and I put all of this down. So when it says in Revelation 6:15, the kings of the earth, the great men, that's megas. And so you also have megastranes, which for great men in Revelation 18:23, for example, and that means lords, nobles, grandees, and grandees is from megagistos, which is part of the whole megastanes and megas Greek words. And so I walk through all of that without getting into too much minutia and show you that these are the same people that are described in the Armageddon battle as described in the Old Testament and the New Testament, and these are royales, the kings of God, Rex Deus, as I call them in book 1. So that's what that's designed to do, is to show you that this end time beast empire that rises out of the Rephaim beast empires has intimate connections to those beast empires, and that we should expect an influence of not only the descendants of those bloodlines, but we also should be prepared for other interaction of giants, whether or not they're recreated or whether or not these 10 kings, for example, are taking on demons and hosting them to provide them additional power. And so in the occult, they believe they can control demons through rituals and words and somehow bring them in and control them. I don't know whether that happens or not, or it's just they're just not fighting back on the inside, like somebody who says something's come in and possessed me, and it turns really ugly because you're trying to throw that demon spirit out, I would presume, because I've never been possessed. But
Diane, I didn't even know Kennedy was running.
Seems to be the case. So there's a connection there in the end time to these beast empires, just as Ezekiel 32 is talking about these beast empires and these ones that are coming back out of the pit prison before the midpoint of the last 7 years, before the Gog War, before the Joel 1 and 2 War, and before the Armageddon War.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Well, for everybody at home, we got a lot more to talk about, but we're going to do that in the members only section at Daily
Okay, guys, I'm out.
Renegade.com. So if you are viewing for free on YouTube or Rumble, head on over to dailyrenegade.com. We're going to continue the conversation. We got a lot more to talk about. One thing that I'm really interested in is the first